Chapter 209. The song ended and the guests dispersed. Princess Taiping sent off the last guest and stood in front of the hall, feeling physically and mentally exhausted. That year, when she got married for the first time, the royal family held a grand ceremony for her. Because the carriages of the bridal party were too big, they were unable to enter the square. Even the door of the square had to be torn down. On the night of the bridal party, countless guards lit torches and burnt the wood on the roadside. This marriage between Wu and Li had great political significance. The wedding was still grand, but because of the hasty preparation, the scale could not be compared to the previous one. However, to Taiping, this was too complicated to bear. In reality, the scale of her first wedding was just a story that other people took delight in talking about. What Taiping could never forget was the joy and longing she felt when she sat in the carriage to send the bride off, the nervousness and shyness she felt when she undressed in front of the prince consort Shui Xiao on the night of their wedding. As for today's wedding, she was only going through the wedding procedures meticulously. The empress personally came to preside over her daughter's wedding and only returned to the palace at dusk. The newlywed civil and military officials and relatives of the royal family took almost 2 hours to send off the empress. When they came back, they still held a banquet to celebrate. Until now, the guests had left, leaving the hall in a mess. The marriage system of the Tang dynasty had red men and green women. However, Princess Taiping was now wearing a black crooked dress. This was a wedding according to the Zhou rites. The Zhou rites were black. Wu Zetian had long claimed that the ancestor of the Wu family was King Wu of Zhou. Her biological father, Wu Shiyu, had the title of Duke of Zhou. Not long ago, Fu Yi led a group of people to ask the empress to change the name of the country to Zhou and call her the Emperor of Zhou. Today, Taiping's wedding changed the tradition of the Tang dynasty and held a grand Zhou wedding. Princess Taiping sneered in her heart. Her mother really did not let go of any opportunity. She was wearing a deep black silk robe with a red edge. She looked dignified and generous. Her knees were covered with jade pendants and other necessities. Her head was not covered with pearls and jade, but only a strange-looking jade ornament. It had the charm of the pre-Qin dynasty. The dark and heavy color of the clothes and the simple decorations, although not as bright and festive as the dresses of the later generations, revealed a kind of solemnity and solemnity. However, when matched with her absolutely joyless expression, it gave off a feeling of lethargy. The steward, Li Yi, stood beside her with his hands slightly hanging down. Princess Taiping heaved a long sigh of relief and ordered, "Just a simple cleaning is enough. Tomorrow we will do a more thorough cleaning. Here." Seeing that Princess Taiping was about to turn around and leave, Li Yi hurriedly chased after her and whispered, "Princess, Prince Consort." Princess Taiping stopped and turned her head to take a look. Wu Yuji's face was as red as a pig's liver. His eyes were half closed as he leaned on a table, mumbling something to himself. Princess Taiping said in disgust, "Let him lie here." As soon as he entered the backyard, the housekeeper, Zhou Min, came to greet him. Princess Taiping asked, "Are Chong Sun and Chong Jian asleep?" Taiping's 4 children were probably the happiest ones in today's wedding. They treated the wedding as a very lively game and spent the whole night in the crowd excitedly. However, before the guests left, they were already tired and were taken away from the front hall by the nanny. Zhou Min replied, "Yes." The young Lang Jun and his wife had both fallen asleep. "Princess, do you want to take a bath?" "The water is ready." Princess Taiping said lightly, "Leave it first. I will go to the study to tidy up something." In the study, Princess Taiping moved the candle closer and quietly looked at the information she had collected. She thought carefully, "Hey, Qi Changji is dead. Longxi has one less general. There must be someone who covets this vacancy. However, the Empress Dowager is about to ascend the throne, so it is obviously not the right time to bring it up. Those people are waiting for an opportunity. This opportunity is likely to be when my mother officially ascends the throne. When the new emperor ascends the throne, the meritorious officials will be rewarded. At that time, it will be reasonable to give the military power to someone who has made great contributions to her ascension. Di Renjie's intention was to take back the military power and not let it fall into the hands of Wu Qingxi. At the moment, the most suitable candidate was Lu Shirda. However, Princess Taiping's appetite was not limited to this. She wanted to integrate all the armed forces in Longyu. Above all the ambassadors in Longyu, there would be a military ambassador in Longyu to control the military and political power of the entire West Helong region. Officially, this could maximize the mobilization of the military forces in Hushi to resist the joint invasion of the Tubo and Turks and ensure the safety of Hushi. Privately, it could allow her to control and influence an important military force. And this undoubtedly required more detailed and deeper planning. At the same time, the mastermind behind the assassination of Heiqi Changji and the plot to seize the military power in Longyu was Wu Qingxi. The masterminds were his left and right-hand men, Zhou Xing and Qiu Xinji. The ones who proposed the marriage between her and Wu Qingxi were also these two lackeys. Whether it was from the perspective of seeking political power or personal vengeance, these two people must die. Whether it was the plot to seize the military power or the assassination of Zhou Xing and Qiu Xinji, although the contest was in the imperial court, the work still needed to be done in Longyu. Only there could the situation be stabilized and she could kill two birds with one stone. Power and the enemy would be beheaded. Thinking of this, Princess Taiping's eyes narrowed slightly. The light reflected in her eyes, like a Persian cat, shining with a treacherous light. Bang! The door to the study opened and Wu Yuji appeared at the door, drunkenly. He stared at her with a pair of bloodshot eyes like a wolf. The two maids at the door were at a loss. The maids at Taiping's side were all highly skilled sumo masters. The problem was that Wu Yuji was Taiping's legitimate husband. Without the princess's orders, they would not dare to offend their superior. Princess Taiping frowned and asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Wu Yuji rudely pushed aside a maid who was blocking his way and swayed as he walked in. He reeked of alcohol and said, Today is my big day. What do you think I want to do? I want to sleep." He spun around dizzily and said in a daze, This is the bridal chamber? Bed, where is it? Quick, help me sleep. Undress me." Princess Taiping suppressed her anger and said, "Fuma, you are drunk." Why can't I be drunk on my big day? I am happy. Haha. Wu Yuji laughed crazily with the help of the alcohol. Two streams of hot tears rolled down his cheeks. He wiped his tears and burped. He bent over and got closer to Princess Taiping. He squinted at her and asked in surprise, "Who are you? Why are you dressed so ugly? You look like your husband just died." "Ha ha ha, this is interesting. My wife just died too. Ha ha ha. Pa." Princess Taiping slammed her palm on the table and raised her eyebrows. She said in a threatening tone, "Fuma is drunk. Little Xiao, Z, bring Fuma to the black-faced man to rest." The black-faced man was an elegant name for a pig. Princess Taiping's residence did not need to raise pigs for meat. However, there was a pigsty in her residence. At that time, donkeys, pigs, and geese could be kept as pets in rich families. The black-faced man in Taiping's residence was a pet pig raised by Princess Taiping's eldest son, Xuechong. "Princess." Two burly maids at the door looked at her in shock. Princess Taiping glanced at them and sneered. "What? You dare to disobey my orders?" "This servant does not dare." The two sturdy maids at the door looked at each other and walked over to pick up the unconscious Wu Yuji. Under the peach tree in drunken spring brothel, Miss Chi-Chi was complaining to Shinmu about her grievances. Suddenly, tears rolled down her cheeks and she sobbed, "Why are you always so polite to me?" Shinmu said helplessly, "Is it wrong for me to be polite to you?" Miss Chi-Chi sobbed. "Do you know that the more polite you are to me, the sadder I am? Why are you always avoiding me?" Shinmu said, "How can there be such a thing? I am really busy." Chi-Chi wiped her tears and said, "Excuses. They are all excuses. Am I, Lilinquan, inferior to a wine cellar like her?" Shenmu's face darkened. "Chi-Chi, you are not allowed to insult her." Chi-Chi gritted her teeth and said, "I know that even though you have 5 surnames, you have been bullied by the main branch of the Li clan. You once said at the Proud Moon brothel in Chang, and women of the 5 surnames are valued in the world, but I am the only one who is cast aside. Just because my surname is Li and I am from the main branch of the Li clan, you despise me, right?" Shinmu's head started to hurt. He rubbed his forehead and replied weakly, "No, yes. Look at how insincere you are. I am in Chang, and you are hiding in Luoyang. Now that I am in Luoyang, where are you going to hide?" Shinmu smiled bitterly. "I will be going to Longxi soon to settle some matters at the White Water Stream." Chi-Chi exclaimed, "As expected, you are going to avoid me again. Am I that annoying?" Shinmu had a stupid look on his face. "What I mean is, if you are willing, we can go together." Chi-Chi was stunned for a moment before jumping up and down in joy. "Really? As expected? A man must keep his words. You are not allowed to go back on your words." Wahaha! Hearing Chi-Chi's savage laughter, Shinmu already started to regret. In the room, Tin Ano and Yang Fan were whispering. There is a reason why aristocratic families can survive for thousands of years and never fall no matter how the dynasty changes. Those who can be groomed as the heir of an aristocratic family are definitely not good-for-nothings or mediocre. Another reason is that they will spare no effort in grooming talents. If they found someone with a bright future, or if this person was a promising talent, they would definitely not let him go. They will not suppress you because they are jealous of your ability, nor will they let you off because they think highly of themselves. They will use conditions that you cannot refuse to make you one of them. They will spare no effort in supporting and grooming you. This is the breadth of mind of an aristocratic family, and it is also the ability of an aristocratic family. Yang Fan's eyes flickered. "I understand now. Shinmu is from an aristocratic family. And so is that young master of yours. Since his contact with me is beneficial to me, why, did you break the rules and tell me about it?" Hearing his question, Tin Ano could not help but feel a little lost. Her big eyes flickered for a while before she bit her red lips and said softly, "I don't know either. Perhaps, although he has no ill intentions, I still don't like the feeling of him wanting to use you." Chapter 210. It was a long night. In the end, Lady Chi-Chi still left. She had no choice but to leave. Even though she had a tough temperament, it was enough for her to barge into a brothel at night. If she dared to spend the night in such a place, no matter how favored she was, her father and grandfather would definitely lock her up in the ancestral hall for ruining the family's reputation. However, she was overjoyed when she left because Shenmu had promised to bring her along to Longxi. Tin Ano naturally had to leave with Chi-Chi. She was the only one who could find a place to stay since the door was closed. After Chi-Chi and Tin Ano left, Shenmu and Yang Fan stayed in this quiet little building. Of course, Shenmu did not dare to call on those girls. In fact, if it were not for his generous compensation, the manager of the Drunken Spring brothel would have chased them out a long time ago. Not only did Miss Chi-Chi's underlings beat up 6 thugs, broke a door, and broke 3 benches, there were even 2 customers who were doing business who were almost impotent after being frightened by them. There was nothing interesting for the 2 men to do living in the same small building, but they did not sleep early. The manager of the Drunken Spring brothel noticed that the lights were always on in the small building. They sat opposite each other in front of the window and chatted until very late. The manager took a nap and found that they had just turned off the lights when he woke up in the middle of the night. The next morning, at dawn, a roar came from the pigsty on the west wall of Princess Taiping's residence. Li Lingyue! How dare you humiliate me like this? I will kill you! I will kill you! Following this angry roar, the bell on the gate of heaven rang. The bell echoed throughout the city, and a new day had begun. Not long after, Fu Yi submitted a petition to be promoted and Princess Taiping married Wu. More and more people submitted petitions to persuade the empress to ascend to the throne. Officials of all levels, members of the royal family, representatives of the common people, monks and Taoists all put forward their petitions to urge the empress to ascend to the throne. After more than a month, they launched the second persuasion. This time, there were also some chiefs of the sea who hurriedly sent envoys to pledge their loyalty to the Tang dynasty. However, Wu Zetian still rejected their requests. Li Dan knew that his mother was waiting for him to express his stance. The emperor was still living in the Eastern Palace. There was no place for him in the imperial palace. The emperor did not have any ministers to discuss with, so he could only find his empress and concubine Dou to discuss the matter of persuading. In the palace, the 38-year-old emperor of the Tang dynasty said uneasily, "Mother's ascension to the throne is an irresistible trend. Mother is waiting for me to persuade her. If I don't persuade him, I'm afraid a great disaster will befall us." He pointed at the stack of memorials on his desk and said, "Look, I never see memorials from the ministers here, but today," Li Dan let out a soft sigh and said, "These are memorials submitted to me by Assistant Minister Zhong Qinka of the Phoenix Pavilion, Great General of the Left Jade Seal Zhang Qianxuan, Great General of the Left Golden Wu Qiushenji, Inner Custodian Xin Changqian, the newly promoted Fu Yi, as well as Imperial Censor Lai Zixuan." Empress Lu asked, "What did they say?" Li Dan said bitterly, "They want me to abdicate the throne and give up the country." There was a moment of silence in the palace. After a long time, concubine Doda said faintly, "Everyone, Your Majesty, why don't you abdicate? It's boring to be an emperor. If you don't take the initiative to persuade her, I'm afraid." Li Dan looked at Empress Lu again. Empress Lu was silent and only lowered her head slightly. Li Dan suddenly covered her face and cried, I'm ashamed to face my ancestors. Everyone be quiet. Don't let anyone hear." Empress Lu looked nervously at the door of the palace. Fortunately, the guards and the palace maids and eunuchs didn't seem to notice that their emperor was crying helplessly like a woman. Empress Lu turned her head to look outside and couldn't help but persuade with fear, "Everyone, the situation is like this. It's really not your fault. Your ancestors will forgive you. When the emperor leaves the court and returns to Wuqing Hall, everyone go to Mother and ask her to abdicate the throne and give up the country." Li Dan wiped her tears. Her eyes were red, and she said woodenly, "Qiushenji said in his memorial that persuading me is a grand act. I should go to the Golden Hall and, in front of all the civil and military officials, abdicate the throne and give up the country to Mother in order to show my sincerity." Concubine Doda held her wrist and said, "This! I'm afraid this is Mother's kind intention." Li Dan's eyes were dull, and she didn't say a word. Empress Lu thought for a moment and said sadly, "Then, everyone, let's go to the Golden Hall and persuade her." When she said this, her eyes also turned red. "Yes, you should go to the Golden Hall." Li Dan turned around stiffly, like a puppet, and laughed. She said faintly, "I've been an emperor for 8 years, and the number of times I've gone to the Golden Hall can be counted with one hand. Let's just let it be." The empress arrives. Greets the empress. Shanghai who was sorting out the memorials in the Wuqing Hall, heard the shout outside and hurried out of the hall to welcome her. Yes. Wu Zetian's expression was not the same as usual. She wasn't in high spirits, nor was she angry because she encountered something unpleasant. Her eyes seemed to be drifting, as if she was here but her thoughts were elsewhere. Shanghai glanced at Xiao Man, who was fanning herself behind Wu Zetian. Xiao Man naturally knew the reason, but she couldn't explain it to her with her eyes. She could only give her a hint to tell her that it wasn't a bad thing. Shanghai Wanner felt relieved. Wu Zetian entered the Wuqing Hall and sat behind the imperial desk. She didn't ask about the memorials as usual, nor did she take a sip of her favorite fermented rice. After a long time, she came back to her senses and glanced at Shanghai Wanner. She said lightly, "This morning, Dan suddenly barged in." Shanghai Wanner said calmly, "Oh? What was everyone talking about?" Wu Zetian smiled and said with a strange expression, "Danner said that he wants to abdicate the throne to the country and let me be the emperor." Shanghai Wanner finally understood why Wu Zetian's expression was so strange today. She had painstakingly planned for so many years, and now she was finally wearing the imperial robe. Shanghai Wanner took 3 steps back and bowed down. Wanner congratulates the empress. "Haha, Wanner, you are also a woman. Do you think I can be the emperor?" Wanner said to herself, "The empress has been planning for so many years. Those who thought you couldn't be the emperor have all been killed by you. Why are you still asking me now?" Wanner said, "People born with extraordinary minds do extraordinary things. The empress is an extraordinary person. Although she is a woman, why can't she be the emperor? I believe that when the empress ascends the throne, the people of the world will rejoice." Wu Zetian was silent for a moment, then chuckled. She looked at the memorials in front of her, which were obviously many times more numerous than before. She asked, "What are these memorials for?" Wanner said, "Most of them are the civil and military officials and the people of the world who urged the empress to accept." Wu Zetian grunted and waved her hand. She said, "Leave them all here. I am a little tired and don't want to read any more." The next morning, during Empress Wu's morning court, the emperor of the Tang dynasty, Li Dan, appeared in front of her carriage again. His shoulders were covered with dew. It was unknown how long he had been waiting there. Li Dan stopped the empress and once again knelt down to beg his mother to accept the abdication. Empress Wu once again refused. This scene was witnessed by the countless palace maids, eunuchs, and imperial bodyguards. Naturally, the scribe recorded this matter in his daily notes. On the 3rd day, hundreds of officials entered the palace. When Empress Wu was about to attend court, she was shocked to find that the 12 robes that Li Dan wore when he ascended the throne were neatly stacked on the dragon desk. On top of the robes were 12 crowns. The emperor, Li Dan, was bareheaded and holding the abdication edict. He was 1 step ahead of all the other civil and military officials in the court, kneeling in the throne room. His words were sincere, and he begged his mother to accept his abdication. The officials were only slightly surprised, but they quickly reacted. They all knelt down and respectfully asked the empress to accept the abdication and ascend the throne. Wu Zetian sat steadily on the dragon, throne in the midst of the tsunami-like cheers. Only when the cheers completely quieted down did she slowly stand up. Her expression was very solemn and dignified. Everyone held their breath. They suddenly realized that the day they knew would come was today. "This is what the emperor means," Wu Zetian's melodious voice echoed in the Golden Palace. Everyone could hear that the usually calm empress's voice was faintly trembling today. "This is what the officials mean. This is what the people of the world mean too. If I continue to reject the wishes of the emperor, the officials, and the people, it will be a great disrespect to Haoyan. Therefore, at the request of the emperor, the officials, and the people of the world, I accept the mandate of heaven and accept the abdication. Long live! Long live! Long live!" The sound of "Long live" rippled out from the Golden Palace, like the morning bell above the gates of heaven. Spreading its sound waves in all directions, Wu Zetian stood behind the royal desk, looking down at her son and the officials who were kowtowing to her with the posture of a ruler. She had long accepted the worship of the entire world, but today's meaning was different. In the past, she had been managing the household for her son. Now, she was managing her own household. She was the emperor, an unprecedented female emperor. The name of the Tang dynasty was changed to the Great Zhou. 3 days later, Wu Zetian officially ascended the throne. Her reign was set as Tian's gift, and the founding emperor was given the honorific title of Great Zhou Divine Emperor. The emperor of the Tang dynasty, Li Dan, changed his mother's surname to Wu Dan and became the crown prince of the Great Zhou dynasty. Wu Zetian wore a ceremonial robe and held a grand coronation ceremony in the palace of Wanxiang. She offered sacrifices to the gods and accepted the worship of the officials. The Great Zhou Empire officially began, and she officially became the Great Zhou Divine Emperor. Li Tang's imperial flag was lowered from the tall flagpole, and the red flag of the Wu Zhou dynasty was raised. The divine capital Luoyang became the imperial capital of the Zhou dynasty, and Chang, and became the secondary capital. The memorial tablets of the ancestors of the Wu clan were invited into the imperial ancestral temple. From the palace of Wanxiang to the Gate of Heaven, the white corridor was covered with a vermilion carpet, and guards of honor stood on both sides. On the long red carpet, Wu Zetian wore a 12-patterned imperial dragon robe and a 12-crowned crown. She walked alone on the long corridor. She entered the palace at the age of 14 and became a talented person by the side of Emperor Taizong, Li Shimin. She became the emperor at the age of 67 and became the first female emperor in Chinese history. How many storms and dangers, how many ups and downs. Her thoughts were like the surging waters of the Yellow River, surging in her mind. The Empress ascended the Gate of Heaven, and the cheers outside the gate were like a tsunami, rising and falling one after another. The Great Zhou Divine Emperor stood on the Gate of Heaven, and his gaze swept over the people who were kowtowing to her and looked into the distance. It was near dusk, and the setting sun was like blood. The blood-colored sunset shone on the magnificent and towering palace walls, gorgeous and awe-inspiring, giving people a terrifying beauty. Now, she was the master of this place, not the mistress, but the master. Now, she was the master of this palace, the master of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 211. The Great Zhou dynasty was established. Wu Zetian was conferred posthumous titles for 5 generations, and her entire family, including chickens and dogs, ascended to heaven. Since Wu Zetian was already 67 years old, there were no longer any elders in the Wu clan. Those of the same generation had all been killed by her, so she conferred the titles of princes to her nephews and grandchildren. Wu Sanxi was conferred the title of Prince Liang, Wu Qingxi was conferred the title of Prince Wei, Wu Yuning was conferred the title of Prince Jianchang, Wu Yu was conferred the title of Prince Jiuzheng, Wu Yuwang was conferred the title of Prince Kuaiji, Wu Yizong was conferred the title of Prince Hanoi, and Wu Xizong was conferred the title of Prince Linchuan. All the Wu sisters were conferred the title of princess, establishing the Wu clan's 7 temples in the divine capital, exempting all the people with the surname Wu from all taxes. Shanghai, one Earth's foresight, was very accurate. Just as she had said to Yang Fan, the person who took the lead in persuading would be able to change his position several times in a year until he reached the peak of the court. That imperial messenger Fu Yi, who was of the 6th rank, was promoted one after another. First, he was promoted by 3 ranks and became the Minister of Rights. Now he was promoted to Luantai's Assistant Minister and Luantai's Minister of Peace, becoming the Prime Minister of the court. The Assistant Minister of the Phoenix Pavilion, Zhong Qinka, who had forced Li Xian to abdicate his throne, was promoted to the position of the Imperial Censor, the Prime Minister of the current dynasty. Di Renjie and Pei Xingbin, the Assistant Minister of Winter, and Pei Xingbin of the Assistant Minister of Earth, and Pei Xingbin of the Assistant Minister of Winter, were also appointed as the Pingzangxi of the Phoenix Pavilion's Luantai and became the Prime Ministers of the Tang dynasty. After that, Wu Zetian announced to the world, "The ancients stopped killing by killing. Now I will stop killing with kindness." This news lifted the spirits of the civil and military officials. They thought that the new dynasty was finally going to put an end to the cruel politics. However, immediately after, The right guard, General Lianjing, and a few other officials who refused to acknowledge the empress were imprisoned and executed for treason. This inevitably caused people to be anxious and did not know what the empress's intentions were. At this time, on a mountain ridge in the Longxi Plains, a group of people and horses were trudging with difficulty. The sky was dark and gloomy, and the clouds seemed to be hanging over the top of the mountain. It seemed that there would be a heavy rain soon. The group was a large tribe. There were men and women, old and young. Most of them wore leather robes. There were not many ox carts and carriages in the group. Most of the things were carried by horses. There were herds of oxen, sheep, and horses in the group. The mooing of oxen and neighing of horses mixed together. However, the people were strangely quiet. They just silently hurried on without any excitement. Hasero reined in his warhorse and looked back at his tribesmen who were struggling on the mountain path. His face was dark. His cheeks were dark and thin, and his eyes were sunken and bloodshot. His sorry figure was completely different from his elegant demeanor in Luoyang. The mountain here was steep and dangerous, and the mountain path was winding and difficult to traverse. Tens of thousands of people, old, weak, women and children, cows, goats, mules, and horses. They didn't know how long it would take for them to walk out. Once they walked out, they would be able to gallop across a wide expanse of flat land. But before that, the road was really difficult to walk on, and it looked like it was going to rain again. Khan! A burly man in leather robes rode up to Hasero's side. Seeing his gloomy face, he asked, "Khan, are you worried about the rain?" This person's stature was abnormally tall and sturdy. He had a curly beard and a pair of spirited eyes. His appearance should have been extremely ferocious, but because of his square face, big ears, and plump face, he gave off a warm and generous feeling. This man was one of Hasero's generals, the chief of the Tukashi tribe Wushel. Hasero said gravely, "That's right. The mountain path has always been difficult to traverse. Once the rain comes, it will be muddy, making it even more difficult to traverse. If we're not careful, we might even fall into the mountain stream." Wushel said, "Then why don't we let everyone set up camp and rest first?" Hasero said, "The pursuers are right behind us. If we stop," Wushel said, "Khan, don't worry. Once the rain comes, we won't be able to leave, and they won't be able to catch up. I'll take some people to the back. If they really do give chase in the rain, I only need 100 people to block off the main path in such heavy rain. They can forget about coming over." Hasero thought for a moment. "That's the safest way." Wushel said, "Then I'll go now." Wushel turned his horse and was about to leave when Hasero suddenly called out to him, "Wushel!" Wushel turned around. Hasero thought for a moment, then said, "After I leave with the old and weak, I'll go straight to Luoyang to ask for reinforcements. I'll leave the Wunu Shur by tribe to you." Wushel said, "Khan, don't worry. As long as Wushel still has a breath left in him, he won't abandon our tribe or our plains." Huzero nodded heavily and said, "Go ahead." Wushel galloped up the mountain path. In a short while he had met up with a few of his trusted aides and was at the back of the group. A burly man asked, "Big brother Wushel, when are we going back to the tribe?" Wushel said, "We'll first cover the Khan and his tribesmen as they leave. Then we'll take a detour back." "All right." Another burly man carrying a 3-pronged pitchfork beamed with joy. "Big brother Wushel, once the Khan leaves, this place will be our world. At that time we can—" Wushel shot him a fierce glare, and the burly man immediately shut his mouth. Wushel coldly snorted and beckoned over a thin man with a shrewd face. He whispered, "Have you gotten in touch with Shinmu's men?" The man nodded. His men agreed, but they said that their reserves are limited and that they can only provide us with 3 months' worth of provisions. As for fighting against the Tubo and Gugulu, we'll have to rely on ourselves. Wushel thought for a moment, then said, 3 months is enough. The Gugulu and Tubo won't stay on the steppe for that long. Let our tribesmen get through the current crisis first. Yes, as the group spoke, They gradually disappeared around the corner of the mountain peak. Longyu was in trouble. Before Di, Renjie, Shanmu, Princess Taiping, and the others could make detailed arrangements for Longyu, the Tubo and Eastern Turkic Khaganates, Gugulu, had begun to move. Just as Shinmu had predicted when persuading Di Renjie, the moment the Turks and Tubo learned of Blacktooth Changji's capture, they would take advantage of the fact that the Qingyuan Path Commander-in-Chief had been captured, the low morale of the armies, and the absence of a new commander-in-chief. This was even faster than Shenmu had predicted, as the Eastern Turks and Tubo had many spies in the areas controlled by the Tang army. Blacktooth Changji had been publicly captured and sent to Luoyang in a prison cart, so there was no need to spend too much effort in making inquiries. The Eastern Turkic spies had personally witnessed Blacktooth Changji being escorted to the capital. When this important news reached the Eastern Turks, Khagan Gugulu was overjoyed. At this time, Gugulu was ill and could not personally go to battle, so he immediately ordered his younger brother, Moshe, to lead an army to White Water Stream. At the same time, he informed the Tubo, who immediately launched an attack on the Western Turkic Khaganate that had submitted to the Tang dynasty. The Western Turks were in dire straits under the attacks of the Eastern Turks and the Tubo, their territory and numbers dwindling by the day. How could they resist the ferocious Tubo army? Helpless, Hiziruo could only disperse the 10 tribes under his command and scatter them across the steppe. Then he led the old, weak women and children back to the Tang encampment to avoid the brunt of the attack. Smoke rose from the western regions as Tang messengers traveled day and night to deliver the news to Luoyang. The divine capital, Luoyang, was still ignorant of the situation in Longyu and was still immersed in the celebratory atmosphere of a new dynasty. On this day, Wu Zetian was holding a grand family banquet in the Wanxiang Divine Palace, gathering all the members of the imperial family to celebrate the peace. The Wanxiang Divine Palace was also known as the Bright Hall. The Bright Hall was where the emperor would hold court and discuss the country's military and political affairs. Using it to hold a family banquet where people could sing and dance and the fragrance of wine and meat wafted through the air was a bit lacking. But Wu Zetian wanted to hold it here. In the first year of the founding era, a year before the death of Gaozong Liji, Wu Zetian wanted to hold a banquet in the Hall of Announcing Politics in the Bright Hall. But Professor Taichung led a group of civil and military officials in retorting. The Hall of Announcing Politics is the main hall where the emperor holds court. It is solemn and dignified. How can it be used to eat and drink? Although Wu Zetian had already seized all the power at that time, Gaozong Liji was still alive and Professor Taichung and the other officials were confident in their stance. She did not dare to act arbitrarily and could only suppress her anger and hold a banquet in the Hall of Announcing Politics. She did not forget this matter. 9 years later, she became the emperor. She insisted on holding the banquet in the Wanxiang Divine Palace, which was grander, more dignified, and more glorious than the Hall of Announcing Politics. No one dared to say anything. The huge and magnificent Bright Hall was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and Yang Fan and Xie Xiaoman strolled around the palace. Yang Fan now only had one enemy left, but he could not find a chance to make a move. Qiu Shinji was skilled in martial arts and slightly better than Yang Fan. He also had many servants around him, so it was too difficult for Yang Fan to get close to him. Now that Yang Fan had Wanner to worry about, he could not risk exposing his identity, so he could only wait patiently. That night in the drunken spring house, he and Shenmu talked until late. No one knew what they talked about. Yang Fan also completely buried the matter in his heart, as if it had never happened. Recently, Xiaoman was a little distracted. She had already sent people to Guangzhou Prefecture, according to the method Yang Fan taught her. According to the time, her people should have already arrived in Guangzhou Prefecture. Notices offering a great reward for finding her elder brother had been posted all over the streets and alleys of Guangzhou Prefecture. Xiaoman did not know when her people would come back, and when they came back, whether they would bring her elder brother back. So recently her heart was full of worries, and she was always a little distracted. Because the two of them had their own worries, They walked side by side for a long time without speaking. When the two of them walked to a corridor in the side hall, a voice suddenly came from behind a screen, and the two of them could not help but stop. Today, Wu Zetian was holding a grand family banquet, and all the dance and music masters of the left and right musical houses and the inner musical houses had come. Each of these masters had a large group of followers and disciples who needed to accompany the masters to perform, so they occupied the east and west side halls and corridors of the main hall for changing clothes, putting on makeup, and rehearsing. The corridor that Yang Fan and Xie Xiaoman passed through also had a row of screens, which divided the extremely wide palace corridor into two halves. One half of the corridor was used as a changing room, and the voice came from behind the changing room. It was a crisp and childish voice. Fifth brother, no matter whether the country is called Zhou or Tang, or whether a surname is Wu or Li, this world is fought for by our family. Now it is our grandmother who rules the world, and it is still our family, do you understand? Don't be listless, and let those Wu scoundrels look down on you. The voice was so loud that the eunuchs who were walking in the corridor and the people who were changing behind the screens all heard it, and the whole corridor suddenly became silent. Yang Fan and Xiaoman looked at each other and thought, "This child must be a member of Li Tang's royal family, and he still dares to speak like this at this moment. I don't know if he is young and ignorant, or if his courage is commendable." At this time, the childish voice said again, "All right, you get ready. I'll go take a look first." As soon as he finished speaking, a small person ran out from behind the screen. Yang Fan was standing outside. That person didn't expect this and couldn't stop in time. She bumped into Yang Fan's thigh. She immediately cried out in pain and covered her nose with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yang Fan took a closer look and saw that it was a little girl dressed in colorful clothes. She had red lips, white teeth, and a delicate face. Chapter 212. Although Yang Fan didn't know if this little girl was a princess or a princess, she was a member of the royal family. He quickly cupped his fists and apologized. "I'm sorry, I couldn't dodge in time." The little girl covered her sore nose and stared at him with teary eyes. She asked in a nasal voice, "Where's Master Ru Mei? Do you know?" She was asking about a famous musician from the inner musical house. Yang Fan was one of the guards in charge of the safety of the Wanxiang Palace today. When Master Ru Mei brought a group of disciples and servants into the palace, it was him who arranged the changing room. He happened to know where this person was, so he said, "I know." "Then bring me to her." The little girl was about to leave when a shout came from behind. "Stop!" The young lady stopped in her tracks and turned around. She saw a person appear from behind another screen. He was dressed in a colorful costume, and his face was only half painted. The other half of his face was still unpainted. Yang Fan recognized this person from this half of his face. This person was Prince Lin Chuan, Wu Xizong. It seemed like he was also going to perform at Wu Zetian's banquet to entertain the empress. Wu Xizong stared at the little girl coldly and said in a deep voice, "Which family are you from? How dare you be so presumptuous? Everyone with the surname Wu is a villain?" Say that again." Yang Fan couldn't help but frown. Wu Xizong was in his early 40s. He was so old, yet he was arguing with a 6 or 7-year-old little girl. Moreover, he was a dignified prince. The little girl raised her eyebrows slightly, but she didn't show any fear. She replied with a glib tongue, "So your surname is Wu?" "There are many people with the surname Wu in the world. I've only seen people pick up things, but I've never seen someone pick up curses. I said a villain with the surname Wu, and you know who I'm talking about, so you jumped out to admit it?" Wu Xizong was so angry that he laughed. He said, "You silly little girl, you're really brave to talk back to me. I won't argue with you about this. Just based on how you spoke to me, I can punish you for disrespect." The little girl curled her lips and said in disdain, "How impressive! What kind of king are you?" Wu Xizong puffed up his chest and shouted, "I am King Lin Chuan." The young maiden sneered, "Don't flatter yourself. You are the royal prince of Linchuan. Wu Xizong said, so what if it's Linchuan Junwang? You don't bow down to me when I'm isolated, and you contradict me again and again. Do you still have any manners? Immediately apologize to this prince, and this prince will forgive you on account of your young age. Otherwise, I will go to His Majesty to discuss this matter. Although you are young, your parents have not taught you properly. They must be punished heavily. Otherwise, how can the dignity of the royal family be preserved? At this time, another little fellow came out from behind the screen that the little girl had run out from. He looked even younger than the little girl, and was a handsome little boy. He wore a set of lacquered armor, and on his head was a green mask with fangs. Seeing Wu Xizong's anger, the little boy was a little afraid, and tugged on the little girl's clothes, signaling her to stop talking. But the little girl was not afraid. She stuck out her chest and said loudly, "You ask me who I am? Good. Let me tell you. I am the third son of the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness, King Chu. You are a royal prince, yet you claim to be alone in front of me and contradict me again and again. Immediately apologize to this prince, and this prince will not bicker with you on account of your age. Otherwise, I will go to His Majesty to discuss this matter. Otherwise, where can the dignity of the royal family be preserved?" The third son of the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness King Chu? Yang Fan was a little surprised to hear this. He had been in the palace for a long time and had some understanding of the situation of Emperor Li Dan's family, who were trapped in the East Palace. Now that this little girl had introduced herself, he realized that this person was actually a man in disguise. It turned out that this person was the third son of the original emperor of the Tang dynasty, the current crown prince of the Zhou dynasty, Li Longji. Li Dan himself did not show his face, and his children were usually under house arrest in the East Palace. They did not see any outsiders, so Wu Xizong really did not recognize him. Now that Li Longji had introduced himself, Wu Xizong could not help but be dumbfounded. Just now, he did not want to admit that he was a vile person, so he avoided the topic and only used the little girl's lack of respect and deliberately contradicting him as an excuse to question her. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, this little girl had become a man and the current King Chu? No matter how much he disregarded Li Tang's royal family, if the other really started to argue with him, he, as the Prince of Linchuan, would really have to lower his head to the King Chu. The King Chu was a prince, and he was a royal prince. Wu Xizong had shot himself in the foot. His face alternated between red and white, and he was very embarrassed. Although Li Longji was young, he was well aware of the situation his family was in. All these years, his family had been trapped in the Eastern Palace, and he knew how his father had been treading on thin ice. So, although he was young and impetuous, he didn't dare to really fall out with Wu Xizong. Seeing that Li Longji's face alternated between red and white without making a sound, the anger in his heart dissipated. He snorted and turned to Yang Fan, saying, "Take me to see Master Ru Mei." Wu Xizong knew what his words meant, so he could not do anything to Li Longji. However, he was still very imposing towards Yang Fan. Once he heard Li Longji's words, he pointed at Yang Fan and said, "You come and help me." Hearing this, Li Longji's anger surged, and the rims of his eyes turned red. He was not afraid of the Wu clansmen, but he also knew that no one took the Li family seriously. If he and Wu Xizong ordered this guard to do something at the same time, this guard would definitely follow Wu Xizong's orders and ignore him. In front of so many palace maids, the Li family's face would be thrown all the way to their grandmother's house. However, he was still young, so how could he have the slightest influence on this situation? In the end, he was still going to lose. The little fellow was angry and wronged, and he almost cried. Yang Fan was startled, and he felt even more contempt for Wu Xizong in his heart. As expected, the descendants of the Wu clan do not have any great achievements. An adult in his 40s actually dared to oppose a 6- or 7-year-old child like this. What a disgrace! Yang Fan bowed to Wu Xizong and smiled, saying, "This lowly servant does not dare to disobey the regional king's order. However, His Highness King Chu wants this lowly servant to bring him to see Master Rumei. This lowly servant is unable to split himself. Wu Xizong sneered. Then will you come when this king summons you? Yang Fan replied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. There is a difference in status. Since King Chu gave the order first, this lowly servant does not dare to disobey. Wu Xizong was startled. He did not think that this little guard would dare to reject his order. Whose world was this now? The Wu clan. How could there be such an ignorant person? Li Longji's eyes lit up when he heard Yang Fan's words, and he was so happy that his heart was about to explode. He really did not expect that at this time there would still be someone who would take his Li clan seriously and care about him, the King Chu. Li Longji looked at Yang Fan and said loudly, "Let's go." After saying that, he actually reached out and held Yang Fan's big hand. As he walked, he turned his head and glanced at Wu Xizong as if to show off. This childish attitude was truly adorable. "Your Highness, Master Rumei is behind this screen." Yang Fan led Li Longji to where Master Rumei, the head consecrator of the internal musical house, was and stopped far away. Although this Master Rumei had already become the head consecrator of the musical house, and many nobles had to be respectful to her, she was still young. She was only in her 30s, and she was still as beautiful as a flower. Beside Rumei was a group of female disciples, and the servants were also women. With so many women putting on makeup and changing clothes behind the screen, he could not be too close. Li Longji let go of his hand and looked deeply at Yang Fan, asking, "What's your name?" Yang Fan said, "This humble servant is Yang Fan." "Yang Fan," Li Longji murmured softly, then nodded his head heavily and said to him, "Good. I'll remember you." He did not say anything else. The Li clan was in a precarious situation, and who knew what would happen tomorrow? He could not promise Yang Fan anything. However, he remembered this name. When the Li clan was reduced to a clown, isolated and looked down upon by others, there was still one person who respected them. This person was called Yang Fan. Seeing that Yang Fan dared to disobey his orders, Wu Xizong was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Seeing Yang Fan holding Li Longji's hand and leaving, Wu Xizong angrily asked a servant next to him, "What's the name of this guard?" "He's called Yang Fan." The voice came from behind him. Wu Xizong turned his head and saw that it was Wu Yi who had just been conferred the title of Prince of Jin. Wu Yi patted his shoulder and said indifferently, "You'd better not think about him." Although the two were both princes, Wu Yi held the position of Grand General of the Featherwood Guard and was more powerful than him. Thus, when he heard Wu Yi's words, Wu Xizong could not help but be surprised. Wu Yi put his arm around his shoulder and dodged behind the screen, saying in a low voice, "This person—" After a while, Wu Xizong let out a low cry from behind the screen. "Ah! Something like this actually happened. Thank goodness you reminded me." "Ha ha ha, good singing." Wu Zetian sat high up on the throne, holding a golden cup and laughing loudly. The one who had just sung was the crown grandson, Li Qingqi. Of course, he was now called Wu Qingqi. Wu Qingqi was 12 years old at this time and was Li Dan's eldest son. Although he was called the crown grandson, he was still confined in the palace. Li Qingqi sang, "Young Master," and for his grandmother. This song was the same as Dancing Seductress. They were both very popular songs in the musical house. Li Qingqi's voice was quite good, and Wu Zetian was very happy to hear it. At this time, a young girl with bright eyes and white teeth walked up to Wu Zetian with a round fan in her hand. The noble princess moved closer to Wu Zetian and said with a smile, "Mother, the person who will be performing for you today is the crown prince's third Langjun, Longji." Wu Zetian was full of smiles and nodded repeatedly. Good. Li Longji was performing a dance called Longevity Maiden. In the side room, Master Ru Mei led a group of musicians to play instrumental music, and Li Longji began to dance lightly in the main hall. At this time, a border army officer with a triangular red flag on his back rushed to the front of the palace gate. He shouted in a hoarse voice, "Urgent!" and then fell head first off his horse. The guards at the palace gate were shocked and rushed forward. Some people helped the fainted officer up, some held onto the horse, and some untied the yellow bag containing the military intelligence from the officer's back and hurriedly brought it to the palace. Chapter 213. Li Longji was still a child. When he dressed up, he looked like a young girl. His voice was also as clear as a young girl's. At the banquet at the Ming Palace, a cup of wine and a song. Then I pray for 3 wishes. First, I pray for the saints to live a long life. Second, I pray for my health. Third, I pray for my children and grandchildren to live a good life. Every year, I pray for my appearance. Wu Zetian smiled again and again. She picked up a piece of candied fruit and put it in her mouth. The more she listened, the more pleasing it became. When she heard the last sentence, her smile froze. At this time, Wu Xizhong sneaked up to her. Aunt, Wu Xizhong told Wu Zetian what he heard Li Longji say in the side hall. Wu Zetian still stared at Li Longji, who was singing and dancing. She asked indifferently, "Did San Lang say this?" Yes. Wu Zetian was silent for a moment. She laughed and said, "We have so many children. Unfortunately, not many of them are successful. This child has some heroic spirit." Wu Xizhong was startled. He said reluctantly, and he said such rebellious words. "How could you?" Wu Zetian glanced at him and said indifferently, "Xizhong, your nephew is here. Do you think San Lang is good as a girl?" Wu Xizhong glanced down the hall and said perfunctorily, "Good. He's very good." Wu Zetian laughed and said, "A child's words carry no harm. You're already an adult. You still want to take a child's words seriously? San Lang is pretending to be a woman, but he's actually a man. Although you're a man, why do you look like a woman?" Wu Xizhong's face turned red and he couldn't say anything. Wu Zetian waved her hand like she was waving a fly. "We're very happy today. Don't spoil our mood. You can leave." "Yes." Wu Xizhong bowed and left. Li Longji finished his performance and received the applause of the entire audience. Wu Zetian laughed heartily and gave him a plate of candied fruits. Li Longji thanked her and retreated. Next, it was his 5th brother, Li Longfan, who went on stage. This Wulong was the little fellow who was changing clothes behind the screen with Li Longji just now. He had just turned 5 years old and was conferred the title of Prince Qi. The Prince of Lanling was the 4th son of the northern Qi Emperor Gao Changgong. Gao Changgong's bravery was unparalleled, but he was as pretty as a girl. In order to increase his deterrence, every time he went to the battlefield, he would wear a ferocious mask. Later generations created the dance of the Prince of Lanlings entering the battle array based on this dance. Among Li Dan's children, King Qi was the most artistic one. With him as the leader, he led a group of warriors to perform the Prince of Lanling and brought the atmosphere of the banquet to a climax. King Qi also received his reward and retreated. Li Dan's 4th princess, Li Huawan, leisurely walked to the front of the stage. Just as she was about to open her cherry lips and sing a song for her grandmother, a guard rushed into the hall. Raising a yellow bundle high in the air, he shouted, "Reporting! Longyo's most urgent military report." The banquet that Wu Zetian had painstakingly arranged to show the prosperity and harmony of the imperial family had been disrupted by Longyo's urgent military report. The Eastern Turks and Tubo had driven the Western Turks who were loyal to Tang East and launched an attack on the garrisons of the Tang dynasty. This series of military actions had become an important test for the newly established Great Zhou dynasty, and the appointment of the commander-in-chief of Longyo's military once more became the topic of whether or not to recover the 4 garrisons of Anqi. In truth, last year, Wu Zetian had appointed Minister of the Right of Wenchang Wei Daijia as the Grand Supervisor of the Anxi army, to supervise the 36 military commanders in attacking the Turks. They had attempted to recapture the 4 garrisons of Anxi, but after several clashes with the Turks, they had suffered heavy casualties. In the end, they had suffered a major defeat at the Yanxijia River west of Crescent City, and Wei Daijia had been exiled to Xiangzhou. Now, the imperial court was forced to reconsider the 4 garrisons of Anxi. At the morning court session the next day, a major debate on whether or not to recapture the 4 garrisons of Anxi began in the Golden Hall. The new prime minister, Di Renjie, led his fellow officials in opposing the western expedition. In Di Renjie's view, the attacks of the Turks and Eastern Turks had already forced the imperial court to appoint Lu Shirda as the Qingyuan Taoist historian. It was enough that military authority did not fall into the hands of Wu Qingxi's ambitious faction. As for the 4 garrisons of Anxi, they were truly of little value. They were remote and unbearably barbaric, of no use to the empire. Whether it was sending troops on an expedition or garrisoning them, it would be a huge waste of manpower and resources. It was better to abandon the 4 garrisons of Anxi and withdraw the main force to reduce military expenditures. This time it was Wu Qingxi's faction that was strongly in favor of going to war. Only by going to war could they seize the military authority of Longyu. But of course, this goal could not be openly stated. Thus, if they seized the 4 garrisons of Anxi, it would affect the Tang dynasty's control of the western regions, and these strategic locations would be of great benefit to the entire Tang dynasty. Di Renjie and the others, on the other hand, were opposed to using this matter to expand the situation and bring up the topic of recapturing the 4 garrisons of Anxi. In their view, any proposal that only focused on one aspect was not advisable. Guanzhong had the Daisen Pass to the west, the Henge Pass to the east, the Wu Pass to the south, and the Shao Pass to the north. Together with the 2 natural barriers of the highlands and the Qinling Mountains, it was an impregnable country surrounded by 4 fortresses. If the so-called strategic locations decided everything, how could the state of Qin have fallen? The Shu Dao was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The Yang'an Pass, the Swords Gate Pass, the Jiaming Pass, the Dragon's Pass, and the Kuei Pass were all places where one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. How could the state of Shu have fallen at the hands of the state of Wei? When a country was at its weakest, no matter how many strategic locations it had, they would not be able to withstand a single blow. Moreover, after abandoning the 4 garrisons of Anxi, there were still many passes to pass, and it was not a smooth road to the central plains. To abandon or take the 4 garrisons of Anxi, one had to weigh the price of taking them and the gains of abandoning them. In terms of eloquence, how could Wu Qingxi, Qiu Shenji, and the others be his match? And while Zhou Xing was eloquent, he was more familiar with the affairs of prisons. This was a matter of state secrets that concerned politics, economics, and military. Di Renjie's rebuttal left Wu Qingxi speechless. He turned to Wu Zetian and reported, "The 4 barbarians are all outside the former emperor's domain. The east is separated by the sea, the west by the quicksand, the north by the desert, and the south by the 5 ridges. These are the boundaries that the heavens divide between China and the west. Now, if we use the outside of the Wulin wilderness to claim credit, we will exhaust the treasury to fight for the barren land. The people will not be able to increase taxes, and the land will not be able to be cultivated. To seek the crown and lead the faraway barbarians, and not to strengthen the foundation and the people, why did we come? The ancients have a saying, 'Books are of the same language. Chariots are of the same track. It may not be safe.' Although this saying is small, it can be used to describe the big picture. If we are greedy for achievements, we will exhaust China and the foundation will be shaken. Won't the gains not make up for the losses? In the past, Emperor Yuan of Han accepted Jia, Juanfang's plan, and stopped the Pearl Cliff. Emperor Xian used Prime Minister Wei's plan and abandoned the charioteers' field. It was indeed a wise move. Our emperor should lose the 4 towns, enrich China, and save military expenses for faraway places. We should also keep the armored troops in the fortress and wait for the enemy to come. Wu Zetian sat upright and listened to the arguments of both sides, but she did not say a word. Hearing Di Renjie's impassioned speech, Wu Qingxi and the others were speechless. She said, "We will discuss whether we should take back the 4 towns of Anchi later. Right now, the Tubo and Turkic troops are at our frontier fortress. If we are a little late, the enemy will take advantage of the gap to invade. Issue an imperial edict. Promote Lu Shirda to be the left general of Jinwu. Inspect the governor of Feng province, and temporarily replace the Qingyuan sect's minister of strategy and chief of the army. Reorganize the armaments, be ready for battle, and do not give the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of. As for the details, we will wait for Huzelluo to arrive at the capital before making a decision." Court dismissed. Wu Zetian brushed her sleeves and withdrew from the court. When she arrived at Wuqing Hall, she ordered, "Summon the Yulin Guard General Wu Yi, the Left General of Jinwu Guard General Qiu Shinji, and the Right General of Eagle Guard General Wang Xiaojie to see me quickly." After saying this, Wu Zetian angrily said to Shanghai Wanner, "State Elder D does not know my difficulties." Shanghai Wanner presented a bowl of Wu Zetian's favorite fermented rice and said softly, "Everyone, please calm down. Master D has always understood your Majesty's wishes. What has made everyone unhappy this time?" Wu Zetian sat behind the table and snorted coldly. "This old man has always opposed me sending troops to the western region, but he is so eloquent that even I cannot win against him." Shanghai Wanner covered her mouth and laughed, saying, "So this is what everyone is talking about. Speaking of which, even though Master D's opinion is different from everyone's, he is still thinking for everyone's sake. If everyone feels that Master D's words are unreasonable, then don't listen to him. There is no need to get angry and harm your health." Wu Zetian's expression softened, and she nodded, saying, "Yes, it is still Wanner who understands me." After praising Master D, Wu Zetian's eyes narrowed, and she said, "We are a woman. When a woman rules the country, the civil and military officials, as well as the common people, have their doubts. If we cannot take back the 4 towns of Anchi or even abandon them, how can we convince all the officials? This time, no matter how many people object, we must send troops to the western region. The 4 towns of Anchi must be taken back from our hands." Shanghai Wanner's expression tightened, and she said, "Everyone, our court has suffered many defeats when it comes to sending troops to the western region. Now that so many officials object, they naturally have their reasons. Everyone must be extremely cautious." Wu Zetian nodded, saying, "We know. We have already been defeated once. This time we will definitely be cautious and plan before taking action." In the evening, Yang Fan discovered that Captain Huang and Captain Cheng had been called away by Brigade Commander Su. After that, Zhang Shidong, Tianyan, Yu Ziqing, and the rest were also called away. Everyone who returned had a strange expression on their faces. Yang Fan couldn't help but stop Zhang Shidong, who had just returned, and asked, "What happened? Our brigade commander has never transferred people alone at this late hour." Zhang Shidong knew that he had some background. Not to mention the brigade commander, even General Wu seemed to treat him differently. So he answered honestly, "The sage emperor wants to send some people to Longyu, but we don't know what they are going to do. I heard that this is a big matter. General Qiu Shinji of the Left Golden Guards and General Wang Xiaojie of the Left Eagle Guards are going. Qiu Shinji is going to Longyu, and the 100 Cavalry is also going?" Hearing this, Yang Fan's heart thumped, and he hurriedly asked, "Has the people going to Longyu been decided? Why didn't the brigade commander summon me?" Zhang Shidong thought to himself, "Longyu is a place of suffering, and there might even be danger to your life. Your life is much more precious than ours. Who can transfer you there?" Although he was thinking this, he only laughed dryly. "Perhaps Lord Brigade Commander has other arrangements for you. Didn't I want to follow the right path to get promoted? Military merits are in Longyu. Wasn't I worried that I couldn't get close to Chioshinji? Chioshinji is going to Longyu. Yang Fan's eyes lit up. Chapter 214. You want to go to Longyu? Wu Yi and Su Liang stared at Yang Fan, their faces full of disbelief. Yang Fan said, "Yes. I heard that you're going to send 100 cavalry to Longyu for official business. I want to go." Wu Yi and Su Liang looked at each other and muttered, "Is this kid doing this on a whim, or is it Aunt's idea? If I really send this kid to Longyu, and Aunt suddenly wants him to serve her in bed, or if he comes back from Longyu and loses an arm or a leg, this—" Wu Yi thought for a while and asked, "You want to go to Longyu, whose idea is this?" Yang Fan was stunned and said, "This is naturally this subordinate's idea." Su Liang could not help but ask, "Why do you want to go to Longyu?" Yang Fan was even more puzzled and said, "Because this subordinate wants to establish a career. This subordinate is a soldier. If I want to establish a career, it is best to fight on the battlefield. Since there is this opportunity, this subordinate hopes that great general can give it to me." Wu Yi thought, "You still need to fight on the battlefield? As long as you put in some effort on the bed." Wu Yi coughed and said, You have only been in the army for a short time. This time you need more military experience." Yang Fan said, "Great general, although this subordinate has only been in the army for a short time, this subordinate's various examinations are not weaker than the other brothers. Even this lowly officer's archery skills, which were originally the weakest, have improved greatly. Battle experience needs to be honed. If this subordinate does not go to the battlefield for the rest of my life, will I never have any battle experience? This subordinate is willing to go to Longyu. I hope that great general will agree." When Yang Fan finished, he knelt down on one knee and gave the most solemn military salute. Wu Yi quickly said, get up, quickly get up. This matter. Go back first. Let this general think about it. I will give you an answer tomorrow." Yang Fan was helpless and could only cup his fists and said, "Yes. Since this is the case, this subordinate will take his leave first." Wu Yi watched as Yang Fan left and immediately said to Su Liang, "Continue to choose the capable guards. I will leave for a while." Wu Yi quickly left Black Tortoise Gate and rushed to the history library, which was where Shanghai Wanner usually stayed. When Wu Yi, the Prince of Jian, arrived at the history library, Shangguanwan had just finished bathing with the help of 2 handmaidens. Hearing that Wu Yi had arrived, Shangguanwan changed into a more formal dress with wide sleeves and a jade-colored silk skirt. However, her beautiful black hair was still wet, so she only tied it up in a lazy and charming bun with a jade hairpin. Her snow-white and long, elegant neck was like a snow lotus on a high mountain. Hearing the purpose of Wu Yi's visit, Shangguanwan could not help but be taken aback, exclaiming, "He wants to go to Longyu?" Yi said, "Wan Yi, wan wan's wan." Fan Yi. Shangguanwan narrowed her eyes slightly and pondered for a moment before saying, "Thank you for telling me about this matter, General. This matter, I will give you an answer tomorrow. Is that all right?" Wu Yi thought that she wanted to ask for her aunt's opinion and quickly said, "Since this is the case, I will not disturb you any more. Goodbye." After sending Wu Yi off, Shanghai Wanner sat under the lamp and quietly thought about this news. She knew that Yang Fan did this to be with her forever. She was very touched, but when she thought about him going to Longyu, to such a dangerous place, she felt very uneasy. When one falls in love with someone, there will always be a little fear, because once you get it, you are afraid of losing it. However, everyone hopes that the man they like is capable and successful. Who would like a mediocre person? That is why there are sighs of repentant husbands seeking the title of Marquis and stories of splashing water in front of a horse. Should she let him go? This night is destined to be a sleepless night for Wanner. You want to go to Longyu? I want to go to Longyu. Yang Fan looked at Wanner with a very determined expression. To me, the fastest way to get promoted is to make contributions great contributions. Wanner, this is a good opportunity. When you first transferred me to 100 Cavalry, didn't you plan to do so? Now that the opportunity is here, why are you hesitating? Shanghai Wanner said worriedly, Wanner did plan to do so, but I never thought of letting you go to Longyu. Whether it is to suppress the rebellion, kill the bandits, or even follow the army, with your identity as 100 Cavalry, you can stay by the side of the chief of the army. But this time, even Qiu Shinji and Wang Xiaojia are secretly going to Longyu. I am afraid it will be dangerous. Yang Fan earnestly said, Wanner, what is not dangerous to do? Xue Huai used betting as a stepping stone to advance his position. Although he was a duke, he was like a vine wrapped around a big tree, throwing away the pride and dignity of a man. Fu Yi used persuasion as a stepping stone to advance his position. Although he became the prime minister, he was like a tree as thick as a little finger, but as tall as 100 feet, unable to withstand the slightest breeze. Using military merits to fight for power, while it is dangerous, the merits must be obtained steadily and with a clear conscience. I know you care about me, but I should go. I am a man. I want to be a big tree that you can rely on, not a vine wrapped around you. His gaze was very calm. Although Qiu Shinji was one of the reasons he wanted to go to Longyu, he was very clear in his heart that even without Qiu Shinji, just for Wanner, he would still go. There was no man who did not want his beloved woman to be proud of him. In fact, men cared more about the difference in status than women did. Some women would consider whether the man's status was better than theirs, and whether they would live a rich life if they married into the family. But most men cared about whether their family status was worse than the woman's, and whether they would be lower than the woman's. When a woman found a man who was 100 times stronger than her, that was her fortune and glory. What accompanied it was envy and blessings. When a man found a woman who was 100 times stronger than her, he had to bear a lot of pressure, and what accompanied it was contempt and mockery. Because he was a man, Wanna looked at her man. She did not ask too many questions, and she did not need Yang Fan to say too much. From Yang Fan's eyes, she saw his determination and courage. She also understood his thoughts. Even though she was very reluctant and worried, she still obeyed his will. She lowered her head and softly said, Okay, you must take care. Yang Fan nodded and softly said, Don't worry, I will return safely. Wanner softly grunted and raised her head to glance at Yang Fan. She softly said, Tomorrow, from Su to Cho, you will be on sentry duty, right? Yang Fan thought about it and laughed. Probably. I wrote the duty time on the wall. I will have to go back and see to know. Wanner rolled her eyes at him and said with slight annoyance, Men are so muddle-headed. Tomorrow night, you will be on duty at that time. Wanner bit her lips. Her fair and flawless face suddenly turned bright red, as if she was drunk in spring. She said, At that time you can come and see me. I have something to say to you. Yang Fan grunted and said, Okay. At that time, I will walk around and go to meet the scenery. Shenmu is going to Longyu? Young Master Jiang was holding a cup of wine. His clothes were as white as snow. He stood in a small, 5-sided pavilion in the backyard of Assistant Minister Pei's rented house. He had one hand behind his back and stood alone. It was as if he was standing on the peak of a snowy mountain. Only Tin Ano stood behind him. However, he did not ask this question to Tin Ano. This was because this news was personally told to him by Shenmu. He knew where Shenmu was going, and also knew that Shenmu's goal was to help Princess Taiping, Di Renjie, and the others fight for power with Wu Qingxi. He wasn't asking himself this question, but he was pondering. Young Master Jiang pondered for a long time and said, Chang'an sent news that Shenmu's men have mobilized a large amount of rations and are constantly purchasing them. At the same time, he has also mobilized a large amount of funds to Longyu. The amount of money and rations is enough to provide rations for an army of 50,000 men for 3 months and 100,000 arrows. What is he trying to do? Still no one answered. Young Master Jiang rarely discussed with others, and rarely listened to others' opinions. He only believed in himself. Teneno obviously knew this habit of his. Thus, he just stood behind him and listened quietly. Young Master Zhang's eyes flickered for a moment and gradually turned into a cold, murderous aura. My Xian sect is in charge of following the experts to fight for supremacy. His hidden sect should be lying low and listening to my orders. Now it seems that Shenmu is unwilling to be left out and is getting restless. The hidden sect is so restless, and if they are not careful, they might implicate all of us. Young Master Jiang slowly turned around and said to Teneno, Wu Mei has already proclaimed herself as the Empress, but the aftermath of the royal court has yet to subside. The situation is changing now, and I still can't see anyone that I can fully support. It is enough to help Taiping, Direnjie, and the others to this extent. We shouldn't get too involved and need to see more clearly before we can take action. This young master will return to Guanzhong in a few days. I will sit on the high mountain and observe the changes in the situation. Teneno then bowed and said yes. Young Master Jiang muttered, As for Longyu, I have to send someone to take a look. What is Shen Mu trying to do? All this while, I have neglected him. He thought for a moment and said, Longyu has always been Shen Mu's territory, and this young master has no right to interfere with the hidden sect's matters. If this young master's judgment is wrong and Shen Mu has something on me, the doyens will definitely be dissatisfied. For safety's sake, I knew you should go. Once you obtain the evidence, immediately go to Mount Hua to see me. Teneno didn't have any special expression on her face. She just bowed slightly and said yes. Young Master Jiang took a glance at her and said indifferently, The West region's various factions are complicated. Especially at such a time, there will be danger at every step. You have to be careful. Teneno might be his servant, but she was raised by young Master Jiang. She grew up from a young girl who was only a few years old into a charming and beautiful young lady. She spent more time by young Master Jiang's side than his wife and son. Young Master Jiang had a very special feeling for her. Even though he knew that this trip was fraught with danger, he couldn't help but be concerned. Young Master Jiang was conceited, arrogant, suspicious, and heartless. There were only a few people that he cared about. When Teneno heard his words, she couldn't help but be moved, and there was a trace of warmth in her eyes. She lowered her head and acknowledged softly. Chapter 215. It was late at night. Wanner sat alone behind the Nanma table with a soup bowl in front of her. It was a wooden bowl made of birch root nodules. This kind of bowl would not crack when filled with boiling water, nor would it break when dropped. It would not burn or freeze one's hands. It was light and sturdy, and it could preserve the original taste of the food. Wu Zetian liked this kind of tableware very much, and Shang Guanwan was also given a set. There were natural patterns on the wooden bowl, forming a variety of patterns. The patterns on Wanner's wooden bowl were like the old branches of a plum tree. Looking closely, there seemed to be plum blossoms on it. The bowl was filled with medicine soup, which was dark red and emitted a strong smell of medicine. Wanner looked at the bowl of medicine soup, and her expression kept changing. It seemed that she was struggling in her heart. After a long time, she summoned up the courage, as if she had made a big decision. She resolutely picked up the bowl of medicine soup that had already been warmed, raised her head and gulped it down. After drinking the medicine soup, Wanner seemed to be relieved, and her expression became relaxed. She put down the bowl and gently wiped the corner of her mouth with a silk handkerchief. Unexpectedly, her eyes fell on the windowsill. There were 2 vases with slender necks and long waists, each with a bunch of orchids in full bloom. Sitting there, one could smell the delicate fragrance of the flowers, waiting for an order. The bath is ready. The bottom has been simmered with charcoal. The water temperature will not drop for the next 4 hours. 2 palace maids walked into the room and curtsied to Shanghai Wanner. Wanner, who was staring at the orchids, woke up with a start. In the palace, Wanner and Twanner both had a large number of trusted eunuchs and palace maids. Because Wanner handled a lot of government affairs for Wu Zetian, she also had many confidants in the imperial guards. It was not a coincidence that she could trust Xie Xiaoman to act as a go-between for her and Yang Fan. These two palace maids were also Wanner's confidants. Even so, Wanner did not want them to know what happened tonight. It was not that she was worried that they would gossip behind her back, reveal some information, or inform someone, but it was a girl's instinct of shyness. Wanner nodded and said, "Okay, you go back and rest. I will read a book and then take a bath." One of the palace maids blinked and said, "Do you want us to take a bath?" Wanner took a book from the table and casually flipped through it. "Oh, no need. I have taken a bath in the afternoon. I just need a simple wash before going to bed." "Yes." The two palace maids bowed to her and retreated. Wanner was reading the book with a look of concentration on her face. But as soon as the two palace maids left, she jumped up like a little rabbit and tiptoed to the door. She stuck her head out and carefully closed the door. Then she returned to the table and sat down. She took out a pack of red candles from under the table. This candle was made from the bark of a kind of ash tree. This kind of tree would give birth to a kind of insect. The insect would live on the trunk and branches of the tree, relying on the tree sap to survive. They would secrete a kind of sap, which was the raw material of this insect wax. This candle would burn for a long time. The candle of this candle was made from the bark of an ash tree. Because this candle was very expensive, even Wu Zetian could not use it every day. But Wanner remembered very clearly that every time Wu Zetian summoned Shuai Yi or Imperial Dr. Shin to bed, she would take these candles from the palace treasury. The next morning, when she entered Wu Zetian's palace to arrange for the Empress lover to leave, she could smell a very faint but strange fragrance that made people feel very comfortable. Tonight was the big day. She decided to give the body she had guarded for 25 years to her man. She could not get married in a grand way, nor could she have the dragon and phoenix candles burn all night long. She had to make her big day as grand as possible, because this was the only time in a lifetime. That was why Wanner had specially brought out a few of these special candles from the palace treasury. Usually, she was the one who brought out these candles for Wu Zetian. She did not have to worry that Wu Zetian would run to the palace treasury to check the number of candles. Wu Zetian did not keep records when she slept with her bedmates. Even if she went to check, she would not remember it clearly. Wanner lit the candles. First, she changed the lamp on the table. Then the antique shelf, the dressing table, the candles everywhere were replaced with red candles that could burn all night long. She then looked at the bed. It was also a brand new bedding and curtains. Wanner let out a light sigh and had a peaceful smile on her face. As the candles burned, a fragrance filled the room. Just a light sniff was enough to make people feel relaxed and happy. She did not know that the fragrance from the burning candles not only soothed emotions and eliminated odors, but also had an aphrodisiac effect. But tonight, she wanted to give herself to her lover, who was about to go far away. She could not help but feel nervous. This unintentional action made her nervous mood inexplicably calm. Dong, dong, dong. There were 3 soft knocks on the door. Wanner, who had just returned to her seat behind the table, stood up nervously and asked in a low voice, "Who is it?" "Your humble servant Yang Fan awaits the decree." Yang Fan did not know if there were any servants in Wanner's room, so he answered like this. Wanner looked nervously at herself and touched her hair. She then said, "Oh, you come in." The door opened without a sound and Yang Fan flashed in. Seeing his vigilant look, Wanner said, "There is no one else in the room. Lock the door." "Okay." Yang Fan did not think too much about it. It was not like the day. He, a guard, entered Wanner's room at night. It would not be appropriate if someone saw him, so he naturally had to lock the door. He did not know that the little white rabbit wanted to eat the big bad wolf tonight. Yang Fan locked the door and walked to Wanner's side. Wanner became a little nervous. Her voice trembled slightly, and her tone was unnatural. She said, "Cough. You are here. You patrolled here. Did anyone see you?" "Based on my skills, of course not." Yong Fan smiled proudly and looked at Wanner's red cheeks. He looked down and saw the medicine bowl on the table. He picked it up and looked at it. He sniffed it and asked nervously, "Why does it smell like medicine? Are you sick?" Wanner made a mistake and forgot the medicine bowl on the table. She panicked and quickly shook her head. "No, I drank. That is a tonic." "Tonic. Oh, it is fairy powder." Yong Fan asked curiously, "What is that?" Wanner was a girl. She did not dare say that she drank contraceptive medicine. She made up a name, but Yong Fan did not stop asking. She could only blush and say, "This is a tonic to whiten the skin." Cough. "Anyway, it is something that only girls take. You don't have to ask." Yong Fan suddenly understood and agreed. He looked at Wanner's current appearance. Her skin was smooth like fat, and her skin was white like snow. She was slightly blushing. She was very beautiful. He could not help but smile. Your skin is already so white. Why do you need to take these things? How much whiter do you want to be?" Wanner shyly lowered her head and said softly, "As long as you don't mind." Yong Fan said softly, "I don't love you enough. Why would I dislike you?" He gently lifted Wanner's chin. Wanner followed his gesture and obediently raised her head. Her dark eyes stared at him with deep love. Yong Fan was dressed in a guard's uniform. He was no different from the other guards she was used to seeing, but the same uniform on him seemed to be full of a heroic and masculine aura. Her lover had hair as black as ink. He had a sharp nose and a pair of clear eyes. They seemed to be able to shine into a person's heart. It made her flustered and her legs weak. Yong Fan looked at the tender lips that were inches away from him. He could not help but kiss them. And Wanna moaned. She did not reject him like she usually did when he tried to touch her. She only stiffened slightly and then obediently opened her cherry lips. She timidly allowed him to invade. He wantonly invaded, tasted and comforted her. Gradually, her heart became intoxicated, soft and moist. It was a lingering kiss. After a long time, Yong Fan gently let go of her. He gently caressed her smooth cheeks and whispered in her ear, "Wanner, I will be going to Longyu the day after tomorrow. You will be alone in the capital. You must be well." Wanner's eyes quickly filled with tears. She lost herself and hugged Yong Fan tightly. She leaned on his shoulder and quietly said, "Without you, how can I be well? Without you, it is like a dish without salt. There is no taste." "Wanner!" Hearing these affectionate words, Yong Fan could not help but kiss her again. This time, Wanner raised her little face. She was like a little sparrow waiting to be fed. She actively catered to him and kissed him. Her young and inexperienced actions, her warm and soft body, and her soft moans like the sound of a flute aroused Yong Fan's desire even more. His hand climbed onto Wanner's jade peaks. Wanner's delicate body only trembled a little. She did not press him down like she usually did. Yong Fan felt her attitude. He became even more aggressive and his hand went down the front of her clothes. Hiss! His palm grasped the tender, round, and full jade peaks. A feeling of ecstasy attacked both of them at the same time. "Wanner!" Yong Fan's breath became a little heavy. His eyes were burning. Men were easily impulsive. Wanner, who did not know the real magic of the worm wax, used the same number of aphrodisiac candles in her room, which was 10 times smaller than Wu Zetian's bedroom. The effect of the strange fragrance not only worked on Yong Fan's body, but also made her extremely thirsty. Maybe tonight, she only wanted to give herself to her lover who was about to leave and establish a real relationship with him. But at this moment, her heart was filled with a desire that made her both afraid and thirsty. She wanted to have her lover, and she wanted to be owned by her lover. Wanner slightly tilted her head and put it on his chest. She used a soft voice to say, "Lang Jun, tonight you want Wanner." Her appearance was tender and beautiful, and her voice was soul-stirring. Listening to her muster up the courage to talk to him, Yang Fan suddenly thought of another night, another woman. The same woman threw herself into his arms, but with a different tone. That woman said, "I want you." And the little girl in his arms, who was trembling with shyness, had the courage to express her love to him. What she said to him was not, "I want you," nor "I will give it to you." Instead, she said, "You want me." In the hearts of these two women, it was clear at a glance what kind of position he had. The love in Yang Fan's heart was like a tide, surging endlessly. He could not bear it any more. He gently bent down, picked up Wanner's legs, and carried her horizontally. Then he walked behind the screen in the inner room. Chapter 216. It was late at night. Xiao Qi's two little hands were holding his head. His two chubby little legs were curled up, and he was sleeping soundly like a little frog. It was already summer, and Duo was afraid that he would be too hot, so she dressed him thinly. Duo was also afraid that it would be too hard for him to tie up his hands and feet, so she completely let him go. Fortunately, although this little guy lost his parents at a young age and could only drink goat's milk, he was very strong and had a great appetite. He was full of energy when playing, and usually did not make a fuss when he was asleep. Moving his hands and feet would not wake him up. Duo was sitting on the bed, not asleep yet. She was arranging her clothes. Actually, there wasn't much to sort out. Most of the things stuffed in the bundle were diapers. Duo had calculated that it wouldn't be easy to wash and dry the diapers on the way to the West, so she had specially prepared more. What else is missing? Duo counted the things in the bag one by one, thinking about what else she should bring along on the way. These 2 days, when Yang Fan took time out of the palace, he had already told her that he was going to Longyu. Every 2 days, Yang Fan would come out of the palace to see her, bring some food, and see the child. This time, he wanted to make some arrangements for her before he left. After a period of searching, Wu Yi had already given up on capturing Chen Niuer and Duo. She only left a hidden guard in front of Ren's residence, just in case. Yang Fan planned to move Duo and the child to Xiaowen workshop and ask Pasta to help take care of them. Unexpectedly, when Duo heard that he was going to Longyu, she begged to go back with him. Yang Fan asked about it. Although Black-Tooth Chang Ji had no relatives in Longyu, Chen Nier's mother's clan was still in Longyu. Although they had never contacted each other, such a large clan should not have been completely annihilated in the chaos of war. After Black-Tooth Chang Ji was captured, Chen Niuer had said that her husband was loyal to the Tang dynasty and had outstanding achievements. But he ended up like this. It would be better for her to return to Longyu to find her mother's clan after clearing her grievances and live a peaceful life with her family. Now that Wu Zetian had just ascended to the throne and Wu Qingxi was arrogant, it was unknown when the opportunity Ren just spoke of would come. Besides, the most important thing was the evidence Madame Chen brought to Luojing. She was just a servant and had never participated in the military. She was not even a witness, so it was useless to stay in the capital. It was better to return and find Madame's mother's clan so the child could reunite with his family. Yang Fan could only agree after her begging. Duoduo's plea, so Yang Fan agreed. She missed Longyu. Although Luoyang was prosperous, to her, it was just a cage that never saw the light of day. She hoped to return to Longyu, where the sky was bluer, the clouds were whiter, the grass was greener, and the wind was freer. She missed the chong flute and the dong-dong sound of the sheepskin drum. That was her forever home. Her only regret was that she couldn't pay her respects to Madame before she left. Thinking of Madame, Duoduo's eyes became moist again. She looked at the sleeping Xiao Qi and gently stroked his rosy cheeks. She said faintly, "When Ah Lang's injustice is cleared and little Gongzi becomes sensible, Duo will bring you to pay respects to your mother, okay?" Xiao Qi giggled in her sleep, and the corners of her mouth twitched as if she was sobbing. The old people said that when little babies were sleeping, they would cry, laugh, or dance. That was because there was an immortal grandma teaching them how to cry, laugh, and use their hands and feet. Duo couldn't help but wonder who was teaching little Seven now. Could it be that Madame was worried about her child, so she came to see her baby in his dream and teach him personally? Thinking of this, Duo's nose turned sour, and she couldn't help but cry again. Her waist was like a willow, and she bent gracefully. Her plump, smooth, and firm round buttocks were faintly discernible in the water. Steam rose from the surface of the water, and beautiful petals rippled on the surface of the water. Against her snow-white skin, she was extremely enchanting. Occasionally, Yang Fan's big hand would attack her vital parts. When Wan'er shyly dodged, her buttocks would arch and she would jump out of the water with a hua sound. In a gentle flash, there would be a dazzling snowy light. Before Yang Fan could see what it looked like, the bright moon would sink back to the bottom of the water. It made Yang Fan's mind go up and down along with its ups and downs. Looking at Wan'er's joyful, satisfied, and happy expression, Yang Fan's worries were quietly put to rest. When Yang Fan was in Nanyang, he had heard many men bragging about their abilities in bed. Yang Fan had thought that he was at least 7 or 8 times better than them, but he didn't expect his first night to end so quickly. According to his own estimation, it was only a quarter of an hour, and that was with him gritting his teeth and persevering. When Wan'er gathered her courage and said, "Lang Jun, tonight, take me," it was as if all the bones in her body had been sucked out with her exhausted strength. Her whole body was soft as if she had no bones. If it wasn't for Yang Fan holding her slender waist, she would have collapsed to the ground. At this moment, she was as soft as a vine wrapped around a tree. Yang Fan carried her into the bedroom and placed her on the bed. He gently undressed her. The insect candles continued to emit an aphrodisiac scent. However, this type of aphrodisiac scent only made people's desire stronger, but it didn't make people lose their minds. Yang Fan's mind was still clear. He wanted to give his beloved a romantic night, not a rough and simple process. However, when Wan'er's clothes were taken off, she buried her head under the blanket with her cheeks burning and refused to raise it again. Yang Fan looked at the bed and was completely lost in it. Wan'er was lying on the bed. Her body was slender, her limbs were long, and her skin was as white as snow. Usually, Yang Fan only felt that she was tall and slender. Now that she was naked, he realized that her slender shoulders and slender waist were the only things that were slender. Her 2 jade-like thighs were unusually plump and plump. They were like 2 egg whites that had been peeled off the shell. Against her slender shoulders, slender waist, and slender thighs, they were delicate and extremely graceful. Yang Fan couldn't hold it in any more. Thus, a battle between a man and a woman began. Even though Wan'er had already prepared herself to give herself to him, the moment the sword reached her feet, she still felt an indescribable fear. Her hands and legs were like 2 pincers, one big and one small, immediately and firmly clamped down on his body, unwilling to let him take another step forward. After a contest of strength, Yang Fan won the first battle, but the strange pleasure that followed almost immediately made him fall into the trap. This had nothing to do with the strength of the body. No virgin could resist the ecstasy and extreme pleasure that they had never tasted before. Yang Fan only persevered for a quarter of an hour before his body exploded into millions of pieces. The ideal was very full, but the reality was very harsh. Yang Fan was very depressed. He didn't know that it was already very rare for him to persevere for the first time in his life for so long. He didn't even know that how could a virgin endure this? Even though Honor often practiced martial arts and had a strong body, this kind of love was already extreme for her. It wasn't until the 2 of them were bathing together and seeing Wan'er's satisfied and happy expression and blissful shyness that the uneasiness in Yang Fan's heart gradually disappeared. Then he happily found that he was ready to move again. Splash! After bathing together for a long time, Wan'er's shyness gradually disappeared. She gradually liked the feeling of mingling with the man she loved. Her extremely white and graceful body was like a dolphin that playfully jumped out of the water. Suddenly, She sank back down and then slid closer. She wanted to kiss Yang Fan's chest, but she immediately found something strange. There was a pillar under the water that reached the sky. At dawn, Wu Zetian's royal carriage was heading for the divine palace of Wanxiang. Suddenly, a little palace maid walked quickly to her and whispered to her, "Oh, Wanner is sick? Did she see an imperial doctor?" The little palace maid said, "I just caught a cold occasionally. It's nothing serious. She will be fine after a day or two of rest. I know a little about medicine, and I feel much better after taking a dose of medicine. However, I can't assist the emperor these 2 days, so I specially sent me to ask for leave from the sage." Wu Zetian still valued her left and right hands very much. Hearing this, she nodded and said, "Well, then let her rest in peace for 2 days. Ask Tuan to get some ginseng supplements from the palace treasury for her. I thank the sage for the reward on behalf of my superior." The palace maid bowed down gracefully. Wu Zetian waved her hand, and the carriage continued to go to the divine palace of Wanxiang. Tuan waited on Wu Zetian to take a bath, change clothes, have breakfast, and go to the court. Then she rested. At this time, she was eating birds' nest porridge in the room. A tall, white, and fat eunuch with good facial features tiptoed in. The fat eunuch reported in a soft voice, "Sister Tuan, the saint has decreed that the palace treasury will allocate some ginseng to Shangguan Daizhao to help him recover. Sister, please tell me." This big eunuch was Tuan Er's confidant named Jingguan. Because he had a thick and flexible tongue, his kung fu often scared Tuan out of her wits, so he was most favored by Tuan. Tuan listened to Officer Jing's report and said disapprovingly, "Since it's everyone's order, let's just pick some things and send them over. We don't have to take the best, just show our sincerity. Does Shangguan Daizhao like these things? By the way, what happened to her?" Jingguan licked his thick big lips and said gloatingly, "I heard that she caught a cold and can't get out of bed." "Really?" Tuan was happy when she heard that. "Well, go pick some things and I'll send them myself. Sister Shangguan is sick. As her sister, I have to go and take a look at her to show my sincerity." Officer Jing chuckled, gave a sound of agreement, and retreated. Wan rarely didn't get up at this time, but today she really couldn't get up. Last night, when she gave herself to her Lang Jun for the first time, her greatest satisfaction came from her heart. The second time, she gradually experienced that kind of happy feeling. The third time, she felt like she was floating in the air. By the sixth time, she was as weak as a puddle of spring mud. The seventh time ended with her pleading because she couldn't bear to fight anymore. Until now, her body was still limp and weak, and she couldn't move. Occasionally, she moved her body, and the soft silk rubbed against her skin, which would produce a kind of numbing pleasure. Moreover, her skin was too white and delicate. Even a light kiss would leave a very obvious hickey. Now she was covered with peach blossoms. Although she could cover them with clothes, she still didn't dare to show her face, so she had to ask for leave on the pretext of illness. From now on, you are my woman. I have been yours for a long time. I will be yours for the rest of my life. Lying in the quilt, couldn't help smiling sweetly when she thought of how she leaned against Yang Fan's strong and heavy chest, hugged his strong back, and told these sweet words to each other. This feeling was so happy, so steady, so beautiful. Chapter 217. Today, all of you will be leaving for Longxi. In a while, hand over your fish talismans and go back to make preparations. After leaving the palace, you will head for Longxi in plain clothes. Yang Fan, Zhang Shitong, Zhang Qi, Tianyan, Yu Ziqing, and a few dozen others stood in front of Wu Yi, listening to his instructions. Wu Yi said, "The situation in Longyu is complicated and the various powers are intertwined. Is the 100 cavalry sending 50 men to Longyu to rely on you to fight the war? Not really. Even if all of you can fight 100 men, You will not be able to change the situation in Longyu. The Empress is sending you to infiltrate the Tibetan and Turkic-controlled areas with the following tasks. Firstly, to investigate the enemy's situation. The tribes of the grasslands often migrate, but they also have a few places where they are often stationed. These places must be investigated, and more importantly, the number of troops of the various powers must be ascertained. Tianyan, you used to be Marquiu, so you will be in charge of this. Secondly, to test the geography. All of you must do your best to mark out the mountains, rivers, water sources, grasslands, ramparts, roads, and other places to create a detailed military map. The Ministry of Works has already sent some cartographers, and these people will be personally protected by Huang Xuchang. Thirdly, it is to understand the conflicts between the various powers in Longxi. Regardless of whether it is the Tubo or the Turks, they are all greedy for their own benefits. There are all sorts of conflicts between officials and soldiers, tribes and tribes. Understand these things and make good use of them. We will be able to break up the enemy and defeat them without a fight. Wu Yi sighed and continued. He Changji has committed suicide to escape punishment for his treason. As for the various reports from the border army, the Holy Son of Heaven is suspicious. This time, I am sending 100 cavalry to Longxi to be the eyes and ears of the Holy Son of Heaven. The Holy Son of Heaven will definitely attack Longxi, and victory or defeat will largely depend on the usefulness of the information you gather. Do you understand? When Yang Fan heard this, he was very surprised. He had thought that they would be sent to Longyu to follow Wang Xiaojie, Qiu Shinji, and the other generals to fight against the Tubo and Turkic Khaganate. He did not expect that they would be sent to be spies. Wu Zetian did not even trust the military intelligence of the Western region that the Ministry of War had gathered. He actually wanted to personally send scouts to understand the situation in the Western region. What he did not know was that first there was He Changji's rebellion, and then Princess Taiping secretly intervened. She used the court ministers she recommended and the eunuchs and female officials in the inner palace, such as Tuan, to indirectly influence Wu Zetian, hinting that the Longyu generals had their own selfish motives and were trying to seize the military power of Longyu. Di Renjie, on the other hand, led a group of courtiers to publicly oppose the war against the western regions and bitterly complained to Empress Wu about the pros and cons of going to war. Wu Qingxi and his gang of thugs were doing their utmost to advocate the advantages of going to war, while Wu Sanxi was secretly dragging Wu Qingxi down. He wanted to facilitate the war against the western region, but at the same time he did not want the military power to fall into Wu Qingxi's hands. So many forces from all sides, through all kinds of channels, continuously instilled various opinions that were beneficial to Empress Wu. The result of all the forces competing together was that a large amount of contradictory intelligence was sent to Wu Zetian at once, causing Wu Zetian to have doubts about the opinions of each side. Before this, Wu Zetian had once used troops against the Tubo, but in the end she returned in defeat, causing her to be especially cautious about using troops in the western region this time. Therefore, she had no choice but to bypass the civil and military ministers surrounding her and send her most trusted aides directly to the western region to understand the situation there. Yang Fan could not help but ask, "Great General, aren't we accompanying the two generals Qiu Shinji and Wang Xiaojie to the western region?" Wu Yi glanced at him and said, "Qiu Shinji and Wang Xiaojie have already left Luoyang. They will go directly to the Qingyuan Taoist camp to meet up with Lu Sherdao. In Longyu, the Tubo and Turkic scouts are everywhere, so you must be extra careful this time. Disguise yourselves, form groups of 3 to 5 people, and groups of 7 to 8 people. In short, it is best to not attract attention." Hearing this, Yang Fan could not help but be greatly disappointed. He had originally thought that on this trip to Longyu, he could stay by Qiu Shinji's side and wait for an opportunity to strike. He did not expect that there would be no contact at all. Hearing Wu Yi say that the 100 guards could form groups and disguise themselves to go to Longyu, he could not help but think of Miss Duo and the baby. If that was the case, there was really no need for him to let Duo follow behind him. It would be better to directly escort Duo to Longyu, and then spy on the Tubo and Turkic military intelligence. If he wanted to do this, he could not travel with others. Yang Fan immediately said, "Great General, I like to travel alone. Can I disguise myself and go to Longyu to spy on the Tubo and Turkic troops?" Hearing this, Wu Yui felt as if a huge stone had been lifted from her heart. "So that's how it is. I really thought that you were full of courage and wanted to use your own abilities to earn a title. I was worried that if anything happened to you, I would not be able to explain it to Aunt. I was still worrying about how to protect you. From the looks of it, you do not want to go to Longyu at all. You can just find a place to hide, and when the time comes, you can bring some useful intelligence to your superiors. Aunt said that this intelligence is of great use, so naturally it will be of great use. Won't it be easy to bestow you a high official? Hey, what a good plan." But when Xue Huai was bestowed the title of Great General, there was no such trouble. That's right, Aunt has just ascended to the throne, and now that she is the Son of Heaven, she cannot be as unscrupulous as before. If there is a reward, naturally it must be justifiable. Wu Yi automatically thought of countless reasons for Yang Fan and naturally agreed to all his requests. He nodded and said, "Of course you can. If you like to travel alone, you can naturally go alone. All right, next, Su Liang will explain to you the detailed arrangements for your trip to Longyu." When Wu Yi gave them their tasks, Yang Fan thought that it was too simple. After listening to Su Liang's description of the detailed arrangements for receiving, settling, collecting, and returning, he finally understood. So the real scouts of the Tang dynasty were still not these people. They were sent to Longyu because Wu Zetian did not trust the intelligence obtained from other sources. But the main reason for their trip to Longyu was to be a witness, to see if the process of collecting the intelligence was true. After they arrived at Longyu, they would be assigned with local scouts with rich experience to help them collect intelligence. Su Liang's description lasted for a long time. When they rushed to Black Tortoise Gate to listen to the mission, the sky was still cloudy, and when they left, it was already drizzling. Yang Fan put on his straw raincoat and quickly walked down from the top of Black Tortoise Gate. The other guards, who were sent to Longyu, did not leave. They gathered together and were discussing who would go with who. Because they had already handed over their waste tokens, they had to leave the palace today to prepare for their journey. The choice of companions had to be decided immediately. The ancient bluestone steps were shiny from the rain. Yang Fan quickly walked down and left Black Tortoise Gate, heading towards the history library. Yang Fan, who was wearing a straw cape, had just left the Black Tortoise Gate when two people hurriedly came from the direction of Jiao City. These two people were Xie Xiaoman and Gaoing. Both of them were also wearing straw raincoats. They saw the back of Yang Fan in the wind and rain, but did not recognize him as Yang Fan. The two of them walked straight towards Black Tortoise Gate. Xie Xiaoman's little face was taut and she looked very nervous. Gao Ying looked at her and comforted her. "Don't be so nervous, you will see them in a while." Xie Xiaoman suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her lips were pale as she nervously said, "Littling, shopkeeper Yin sent a message saying that he brought back a total of 4 people. Among them, 3 of them must be fake. I'm afraid. What if all 4 of them are fake? I have already rejoiced in vain many times. If this method still cannot find elder brother, As Xiaoman spoke, tears began to well up in her eyes. When she heard that the people that shopkeeper Yen had sent to Guangzhou Prefecture had already returned, and had even brought back 4 child beggars who claimed to be her elder brothers, the string that had been stretched taut in Xiaoman's mind for a long time finally snapped. She very much wanted to find someone to pour out the anxiety and fear in her heart, and wanted this person to accompany her to see shopkeeper Yen on Yanlu Tower, because she no longer dared to bear the blow of disappointment alone. The first person she thought of was Yang Fan. In the end, When she rushed to Yang Fan's camp, she heard that he had been summoned by great General Wu Yi. So she found her good sister Gao Ying and told her the things that she had suppressed in her heart for many years. At this time, Gao Ying already knew her pain. Gao Ying saw her uneasy look and hurriedly comforted her. "Silly girl, you haven't seen them yet, but you are already scaring yourself. Maybe when you see them in a while, you will immediately find your elder brother. Think about it, finding for it once. Even if there are swindlers, can they all be swindlers? This time, you will definitely find your elder brother." Yes. Xiaoman's crying turned into a smile. Because of this smile, tears finally rolled down her cheeks. Gao Ying wiped her tears and teased her. "Look at this pitiful look. Even I feel sorry for you. Let's go quickly. Your elder brother must be anxiously waiting for us." "Yes, let's go." Xiaoman continued to walk out, nervously hoping to eat another pill of reassurance. "My elder brother must have really found him this time, right?" Gao Ying casually said, "Of course. Definitely. If all 4 of them are fake this time, you can put up notices all over the Tang dynasty. As long as your elder brother is not dead, he will definitely see it." Xiaoman glanced at her, her little mouth flattened, tears glistening, and she was about to cry again. Gao Ying saw this and couldn't help but say awkwardly, "Ah, I was talking nonsense. You see, the weather is so good today. Your elder brother must have found him. I can even hear the magpies singing, ha ha ha." The rain hit the flowers and plants outside the window, making a rustling sound. Wan sat alone by the window, looking at the flowers that were watered by the rain and became more and more beautiful. She had rested for 2 days. The first day when Tuaner came to see her, she clearly saw that she was lying on the ground and didn't even have the strength to speak, but she insisted on sitting by the bed and chattering endlessly. Tuan almost saw the kiss mark on her neck. Later, when the stewards of the various departments in the palace, the scholars of Hongwen School, and the inner study came to visit, they only put down the gifts outside and greeted a few words through the screen, so there was no more risk. Wan lazily lay on the bed for a day, and finally got up today. She only felt that she had been reborn and her whole person had changed. Looking at the radiant and beautiful appearance in the mirror, she was shocked. She thought that she might be very haggard. What changed was not only the charm of her eyes, but also her state of mind. In the past, every time it rained like this, she always had an inexplicable melancholy in her heart. But now her state of mind suddenly changed. Looking at the rain, looking at the beautiful flowers, it seemed that the clear sound of the rain was like a cheerful music. Wan held her chin, quietly looking at the flowers in the rain. Sometimes there was a smile on her face, and sometimes there was a flash of shyness. Just like the flowers in the rain, she was as beautiful and beautiful. At this time, Yang Fan had just stepped into the door of the history library. Chapter 218. Although it was summer, the pitter-patter of rain felt chilly after a long time, especially in a quiet place like the Hall of History. The main hall was quiet. A few historical scholars were probably annoyed by the prolonged rain and were dozing off with their hands on their chins. As for Master Guan, Yang Fan had not seen him for a long time. The old man cherished his life. Yang Fan did not turn directly to Wan or his study. He went to the side room where the documents were stored and left through a small door at the back. He came to Wan or his study, took off his raincoat and knocked on the door. When the door was opened, Yang Fan walked in and closed the door. Wan threw herself into his arms and happily said, "Lang Jun." "Wan Yang Fan threw the raincoat to the side and gently held her waist. "The order to go to Longyu has been given. I have to leave in a while." "So fast?" Wan left his arms and said in surprise. She had been resting in the library for the past 2 days and did not ask about the outside news. Even though there were many stewards from various departments and bureaus who came to see her, and many of them were her confidants, they did not think that a 100 cavalry guard would have any connection with the high and mighty Shangguan Daizhao. Naturally, they did not mention this to her. Yang Fan nodded. Seeing her pale face, He could not help but feel sad. Yang Fan softened his voice and said, "Don't be sad. Didn't we agree on this earlier? The earlier I go, the earlier I will return. I will definitely do my best to make a great contribution and marry you in a grand manner. Don't you want us to be together openly?" Wan bit her lips and nodded. "Lang Jun, don't worry. Wan is not an unreasonable woman. Wan only hopes that Lang Jun will take care of his health. It doesn't matter if you make a great contribution or not, but you must be well." Yang Fan said, "Don't worry. I am only going to be a spy. I will find out that it is a small merchant and gather information. There will be no danger." "Yes." Wanner meekly agreed and gently leaned into his arms. The rain outside the window seemed to slow down, and the sound of the rain also softened, rustling their emotions. After a long time, Yang Fan gently pushed her away and said, "I have to go out of the palace to make some preparations. I will be leaving soon. Don't worry, I won't be in Lanyu for too long. I'll be back when the plum blossoms." Wan's eyes brightened. She asked expectantly, "You promise?" Yang Fan hesitated for a moment before changing his words. "At the latest, when the next peach blossoms bloom." Wanna smiled. Her smile was like a blossoming peach blossom. She was like a swallow returning to the forest. She jumped into Yang Fan's embrace and hugged him tightly. Then she let go and took 2 steps back. She looked at him affectionately and said, "Lang Jun, please go. Forgive me for not being able to see you off. Wan will be here waiting for you to come back." Yang Fan nodded heavily, picked up the straw raincoat, and walked out. Wanner quickly walked to the window and watched as Yang Fan, who had put on the straw raincoat, strode away and disappeared in the rain. The tears that she had been holding back for a long time also fell like the raindrops outside the window, outside the courtyard of the female guard's dormitory. Yang Fan stood there with a straw raincoat draped over his shoulders. In the room, Lan Yiqing heard the question coming from outside. She held up an oil paper umbrella and ran out. "Why is Erlang here?" As soon as she saw Yang Fan, Lan Yiqing's smiling eyes turned into a pair of curved crescent moons. Yang Fan smiled and said, "Miss Xiaoqing, is Xiedui here?" "I guess that you are here to see Sister Xiaoman." Lan Yiqing covered her mouth and chuckled. Xia Xiaoman and Yang Fan were indeed too close. Other than Gaoing, who knew that Xia Xiaoman often got close to Yang Fan to pass messages on behalf of Shangguan Daizhao, the other female guards knew nothing about it. Therefore, in their hearts, Xia Xiaoman and Yang Fan were a couple. Yang Fan smiled. He didn't want to explain this to her, so he just asked, "Yes, may I ask if Xiedui is here?" Lan Yiqing said, "Unfortunately, Sister Xiaoman and Sister Xiaoying went out together. I saw them, but they were playing shuanglu with someone, so I didn't ask them. I don't know where they went. They put on straw raincoats and went out, so they must be leaving the palace." "Is that so?" Yang Fan was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he said to Lan Yiqing, "I have a secret order to go out on business. It may take a few months before I return. Before I leave, I specially came to say goodbye to Xiedui. Since the county commandant is not here, I'll have to trouble Miss Xiaoqing to pass on the message." Lan Yiqing let out an ah and said in surprise, "You're going out of town on business, this? Can you wait for Sister Xiaoman to come back and tell her personally?" Yang Fan shook his head and looked at the sky. Yang Fan has also just received the order to go out. There is not enough time, so I can't wait for Xiedui to come back. I'll have to trouble Miss Xiaoqing to pass on the message." He smiled at Lan Yiqing, then turned and walked out. In the backyard of Xia's jewelry head ornament shop in Luoyang City, Xia Xiaoman glared at the 4 beggars who pretended to be elder brother without saying a word. Gaoing looked at her and gently pulled her sleeve. She whispered, "Forget it, they're just a bunch of greedy people." Xia Xiaoman suddenly shook off her hand and stared angrily at the 4 cowering beggars. She asked loudly, "Why did you lie to me?" The 4 beggars who had been exposed by her cowered and did not dare to answer. Xia Xiaoman was so angry that she cried. Tears fell one by one. She sobbed and said, "Why did you lie to me? I just wanted to find elder brother. Why did you lie to me? Why did you make me sad again and again?" One of the beggars puffed out his chest and said shamelessly, "Who lied to you? I just got separated from my little sister, who begged with me since childhood. How would I know if it was you? You brought me all the way from Guangzhou Prefecture to Luoyang and tormented me for nothing. I still have a bellyful of injustice." The other beggars began to act shamelessly. That's right. It was you who didn't find out. How can you blame others? Fine. I won't say anything else to you. You just have to pay for my travel expenses, accommodation, and meals. I will return to Guangzhou. Otherwise, I won't listen. When Xia Xiaoman heard these shameless words, she could not help but fly into a rage. A bunch of scoundrels! How dare you! In a moment, there was a burst of ghostly wails and wolf howls coming from the back of the shop. A cough! Shopkeeper Yen coughed and blocked the valiant figure of Xiaoman behind him. He told the waiter who had heard the news, "Boss has something to do. Close the shop." Ma Qiao's house had a new noodle stall at the entrance of the alley. The shed was not completely set up yet. Because of the rain, the neighbors who had been invited to help had all gone back. Most of the shed was left there. When Yang Fan arrived, Pasta was tidying up the things under the shed. Although there was a half-built shed to block the wind and rain, the slanting wind and drizzle still came in and wet her clothes. Yang Fan and Pasta stood under the shed and talked. Pasta had already dressed up as a married woman. She had her face shaved, her eyebrows trimmed, and her hair was tied up in a woman's bun. She looked like a gentle young married woman. Pasta excitedly said to Yang Fan, "I was thinking I don't know any other crafts. If I randomly try some things, I might not be able to make money. It's better to open a noodle stall. The capital will be paid by my mother and mother-in-law. With the 2 of them helping me, I can expand my business a bit. The leftovers can be cooked, and we can raise a few more chickens and geese at home." Yang Fan smiled. "That's good. I was worried that after you got married, your mother would have no one to rely on. This is the same as 2 families working together. We can both look after each other." Pasta said, "That's right. Fortunately, our 2 families are close, and the mother-in-law is kind, so I can take care of the 2 old people. Oh yes, it's raining today. Why did you run out?" Yang Fan did not tell her that he was going to Longyu to prevent her from worrying. He only smiled and replied, "It's nothing. Tomorrow I will be accompanying a general to Chang, and on official business. I'll probably only be back next spring. So I came to see and say hello in advance. If I don't come for a long time, sister will miss me. How often can brother Qiao come back?" Pasta heard that he was escorting a general to Chang, and that there was no danger, so he did not think too much about it. Hearing him ask about Ma Qiao, he said, "He can't be counted on at home. He only has 1 promotion a year, and each time he can only visit his family for half a month. Although he is now a bodyguard of the general and can move freely, he can't leave the army without permission." Hearing this, Yang Fan could not help but sigh. In his opinion, Ning Jejie and Qiao Ge were a good couple, but this kind of husband and wife could only spend 15 days a year together. Ning Jejie originally only needed to take care of 1 old man, but now she had to take care of 2 old men. Pasta smiled. "What, you think it's hard on sister? Actually, it's not that bad. Mother-in-law and my mother are very healthy, so taking care of them isn't very hard. It's rare that he can be recognized by the general. If he works hard in the army, he will be able to make a name for himself in a few years. It's worth it." Looking at her expression, she was really happy and proud. After all, she had only been in the army for such a short time, but she was able to be recognized by the general and become his bodyguard. This meant that her man was very outstanding. If he worked hard for a few years, Qiao Ge could at least be a cook. If he was lucky, he could even be a squad leader. In this marketplace, how many men had such ability and glory? A man lives with a face, a tree lives with a bark. If Ma Chiao could have such a future, as his wife, Jiang Sining would be the proudest and proudest person. No matter how much hard work she had to put in, she would be willing to do it. Looking at Jiang Sining's expression, Yang Fan suddenly thought of one, or perhaps, even if it wasn't for an identity that was worthy of her, just for the pride she had for him, he should go to Longyu and do a big job. Yang Fan raised his head and looked at the misty sky. A heroic spirit rose in him. In a private room of the Drunken Golden Hairpin restaurant, the informant, Zhao Yu, sat beside Shinmu and explained. We don't have a complete grasp of the people that the various powers have sent to Longyu. After much effort, we can only get a partial list. He placed the list in front of Shanmu. This is the list of people that Princess Taiping has sent to Longyu. This is the list of people that Wu Qingxi has sent to Longyu. Wu Sanxi did not want to be left out and also sent people. This is the list of people that he has sent. The last one is absolutely detailed. This is the list of people that the 100 cavalry have sent to Longyu. Shenmu smiled. So lively? Is everyone going to the market in Longyu? He casually picked up the list at the top and glanced at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. Yang Fan is also in it? Haha, this is even more lively. Chapter 219. After Yang Fan left Ma Chao's house, he went to Nanchur City, which was the closest to the Ma family. At this time, the market was not over yet. However, because of the rain, there were not many customers in the market. When Yang Fan arrived at the livestock trading area, there were only a few livestock traders, still wearing straw raincoats and holding on. It was just a simple negotiation. Yang Fan was eager to make a deal, and the other party was eager to close the stall. In the end, with a price that both sides could accept, Yang Fan bought 2 horses and a large carriage. The carriage was very simple and old, but the wood and workmanship of the carriage were all very good. For the carriage to still be so sturdy despite its age, it was enough to show the effort that had been put into it. Moreover, the carriage was not extravagant and conspicuous, and was suitable for long-distance travel. The horses were 2 old and skinny horses. By the time Yang Fan arrived, there were no good horses left in the stall. As for driving a carriage, as long as one had the strength to pull the carriage, it would be fine. There were only 2 adults and 1 child. The 3 of them added together did not even weigh 200 pounds. 2 old horses were enough to pull the carriage. Yang Fan paid the money, and with the help of the livestock trader, he hitched the horses to the shafts and drove the carriage out. The carriage was really good, but the wheels were a bit squeaky. After a bit of grease, it would not be a big problem, and the 2 old horses were used to pulling the carriage. Although Yang Fan was not very proficient in driving, he was still able to control it. When Yang Fan drove the carriage towards the south gate of the South Market Square, there were only a few customers left on the spacious main street of the market square. The drum at the entrance of the market square had already begun to beat slowly. After 300 beats, the market square would close. At this time in the drizzle, Xiao Man was being comforted by Gao-Ying. She was very sad as she walked towards the north gate of Nanchur City, preparing to rush back to the palace. They stepped out of the workshop almost at the same time on a long street that led from south to north. Second brother, you're here. I'll heat up something for you to eat. Seeing Yang Fan drive the carriage into the courtyard, Duo, who had long been waiting in the corridor with the child in her arms, was very happy. Yang Fan smiled and said, "There's no hurry. Although it's raining, the sky isn't dark yet. Let's cook after a while." As he spoke, he untied the 2 horses from the shafts of the cart and tied them to the stables at the side. Then he took 2 bags of fodder and beans from the cart and placed them in the stone troughs in front of the 2 horses. Then he patted the horses' rump and walked out. Shao Qi was held in Duoduo's arms. He stared at the 2 horses without blinking with his big black eyes. Ever since he was born, He had never seen such a big monster. Yang Fan took off his raincoat and hung it on the pillar. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Come, Shao-Chi, let uncle carry you." Because Yang Fan came to see him every few days, he was the person Shao-Chi was most familiar with other than Duo. Moreover, Yang Fan liked to tease him, so he was the most fond of him. As soon as he saw Yang Fan open his arms, Shao-Chi grinned and leaned into his arms. The little guy didn't know how to open his arms to respond to him. He just arched his little butt and leaned his whole body toward him. Yang Fan took him from Duo's arms and kissed him on his tender cheek. He chuckled. Duo, have you packed everything?" "Yes, I've packed everything." Duo looked at Yang Fan with her big eyes. Her eyes were filled with gratitude and kindness. "Second brother, I'll pack up first. I'll leave tomorrow morning. Cook more food tonight." Yang Fan agreed. Duo picked up the bucket and rushed into the drizzle. Soon she came back with a bucket of water from the well and quickly brought it to the kitchen. Yang Fan carried Shao-Chi and wandered around with nothing to do. Sometimes he pointed here and there, using exaggerated gestures and tones to tease the little guy. When Shao-Chi was happy, he would always grin and spit a few bubbles of saliva. "Second brother, actually it's enough to prepare a horse. Put the things in the horse bag. It'll be more convenient for me to carry Shao-Chi and ride after you. I'm afraid I'll lose you if I drive." As Duo spoke to Yang Fan, she bent down to brush the pot with the loofah. She had even changed into a short-sleeved shirt and narrow trousers, suitable for long-distance travel. When she bent down, her youthful and healthy little butt arched beautifully. Yang Fan originally followed behind her because he had nothing to do. Seeing that the situation wasn't suitable for him to watch, he turned around and stood under the eaves. He grabbed Shao-Chi's little hand to play with the rein and replied, "There's no need. I originally thought that I would go with the army to Longyu, who knew that we would disguise ourselves and secretly go to the western region. In that case, I won't travel with anyone else. When the time comes, I'll drive the carriage and you can take care of the child. We'll go together. I'll send you back to settle down first before going to do my work." "Really? That's great." Duo jumped for joy. Her wheat-colored face flushed with excitement, and her pair of big eyes glowed like a rose quietly blooming in the dark night, giving off a feeling of beauty in the dark. Although she was a woman from the frontier fortress, riding a horse, riding in archery, and traveling on long journeys, she was much more independent than the women of Luoyang. But after all, she had never traveled such a long distance by herself. It was inevitable that she would feel apprehensive. For the past 2 days, what she was most worried about was whether or not she would lose Yang Fan and get lost. Now that Yang Fan was going with her, the little girl's heart was finally at ease. Dinner was very simple, but for Duo it was very rich. After dinner, Yang Fan played with Shao-Chi on the bed for a while until the little fellow fell asleep from exhaustion. Only then did Yang Fan go to the opposite wing to stay. The night passed uneventfully. Before dawn the next day, Duo was woken up by Shao-Chi, who had peed on the bed. She helped the little devil change his diaper and took advantage of the fact that the sky hadn't brightened yet to cook. When the morning bell of the gate of heaven rang and the entire city responded, Yang Fan and Duo had already eaten breakfast and were ready to leave. A carriage drove out of Luoyang and set foot on the road to the west. In the carriage, there was a man, a woman, a sleepy baby, and a bleating sheep. At first, when he saw Duo carrying a bundle of grass and leading the milk sheep to get on the carriage, Yang Fan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, Duo was confident. "If we don't bring the sheep, what will Shao-Chi eat on the way?" She grew up in the frontier fortress and was used to seeing the nomadic tribes migrate on the grassland. Not to mention a sheep, she could even drive a flock of sheep. She was very puzzled by Yang Fan's fuss. Yang Fan thought about it carefully and felt that it was indeed fine. There were many people carrying chickens and ducks and pigs into and out of the city. Even if there was a sheep in the carriage, it wouldn't attract much attention. Although the most common beverage in the market was dairy products, it wasn't always possible to buy fresh milk. It was easy to deal with adults, but children's food had to be prepared. In any case, they were dressed very ordinarily. As a result, Yang Fan wore 2 pieces of clothing and disguised himself as a country bumpkin. Duo Duo wore a woman's bun and disguised herself as his wife. Xiao Qi naturally became the crystallization of this newlywed couple's love. Driving the carriage, carrying the milk sheep, pots, bowls, ladles, and a large pile of things, they set foot on their road to the west. A few days later, they passed through Tongguan and set foot on the land of Guangzhou. There were a few bamboo poles on the carriage with pieces of diapers hanging on them. As they traveled, it was like a national flag waving in the wind. The large amount of diapers that Duo Duo had prepared was finally finished. They had to wash and dry them along the way. However, this also happened to be the best camouflage. No one would have thought that this family of 3 were actually secret agents heading to Longyu. Wu Sanxi's people, Wu Qingxi's people, and Princess Taiping's people passed by them one after another. No one gave them a second glance. Even the comrades who were disguised as horse merchants didn't notice them. Riding alone on a horse, Tin Ano, who was disguised as a handsome young man, also ignored Yang Fan and rode past him. At that time, Yang Fan was bare-chested, wearing a pair of trousers and a bamboo hat to block the sun. His beard was unkempt, and his face was covered in dust. He swayed under the shaft of the carriage with his bare feet, teasing Xiao Qi, who was babbling in his arms. Fortunately, Tin Ano didn't recognize him. Otherwise, he would have fallen off his horse. However, there was someone who had been staring at Yang Fan and leisurely followed behind him. This person was Shenmu. Shenmu was very puzzled. He didn't know where Yang Fan found a woman and a child to act as a cover. He followed behind and didn't meet Yang Fan. He wanted to find out the origins of this woman and child first. It was a pity that, even though his men were omnipotent, they couldn't find out the truth. Only Di Renjie knew about this matter. Even Steward Xu, who was guarding outside the door, didn't know the details. Although Shenmu had a beautiful woman in Di Renjie's residence, he naturally didn't know about this matter. In the end, Shenmu almost suspected that this woman and child were really Yang Fan's wife and child. However, if that was the case, there was no reason for Yang Fan to bring his wife and child to Longyu to take the risk. Shenmu followed them all the way from Luoyang, but he still couldn't find out the identity of this woman and child. Shenmu didn't want to wait any longer. Longyu was his biggest base, and this crisis was a great opportunity for him. Moreover, Yang Fan's involvement gave him hope. As the saying goes, although a urine bubble is big, it doesn't weigh much. Although a weight is small, it can weigh 1,000 caddies. With Yang Fan's involvement, he quickly revised his plan. He wanted to reap the greatest benefits from Longzhong, and Yang Fan would become an extremely important part of his plan. In order to achieve this, he couldn't use trickery and schemes to achieve his goal. He had to be honest with Yang Fan and obtain Yang Fan's understanding and support. The journey to the west was long. Wasn't this a good opportunity to open up to him? Shenmu made up his mind. He waved the fan in his hand and ordered, "Hurry up and catch up!" Miss Chi-Chi snorted softly. Along the way, Shenmu only had Yang Fan in his heart and didn't even look at her. However, it was fortunate that Shenmu finally took her into consideration and sent the vixen back to Chang. With this thought, Miss Chi-Chi didn't flare up. She was already seen as a vinegar jar. Could it be that not only was she jealous of the vixen, but she was also competing with a man? The road ahead was smooth and there was only one path. When Yang Fan saw this, he stuck the big whip on the shaft of the carriage and let the old horse move on its own. He turned back to look at Duo Duo. Due to the hot weather, the ventilation in the shed was not smooth and the sun was blazing outside. Duo Duo was sitting in the shade of the shed, hugging Xiao Qi and looking a little drowsy. Yang Fan couldn't help but laugh. "Come, let me hold the child for a while. You can rest." Yang Fan stretched out his hand, and just as he took the child, the carriage suddenly jolted. Duoduo's body leaned forward, and Yang Fan felt the edge of his palm touch a tender, bouncy, and soft place. Duoduo's pretty face turned red, and she felt a little embarrassed. At this moment, a few strong horses galloped over and overtook Yang Fan's carriage. They reined in and blocked their path. Chapter 220. In July, the sun was scorching. Most travelers would choose to travel in the morning and evening, choosing a place to rest and enjoy the shade when the sun was high in the sky. Thus, there were not many travelers on the road at this time. Suddenly, several fast horses caught up and immediately alerted Yang Fan. Their action of reining in their horses and blocking the road made Yang Fan even more vigilant. Duo! Yang Fan handed the child to Duo and gave her a look. Duo understood and quickly took the child and shrank into the carriage shed. Yang Fan pulled the carriage and quietly moved the hilt of the knife under the straw mat. He pretended to be a simple and honest countryman and asked in a daze, "Why are you brothers blocking my way?" A knight used a whip to push up his sun hat, revealing the dark and shrewd face of a middle-aged man. The middle-aged knight's sharp eyes glanced at the place where the knight's fingers touched, and he said with a faint smile, "Please wait for a moment, young Langjun. My master will explain to you." "Your master?" Yang Fan turned his head and saw 2 large carriages with wide axles and large wheels quickly rushing over. There were more than a dozen guards in green riding uniforms around the carriage. Yang Fan secretly cursed. If the people coming had evil intentions, he was not sure he could protect Duo and Shao Qi in the hands of so many people. The carriage got closer and closer. The carriage was not very gorgeous. This kind of long-distance carriage, especially the one going in the direction of Guangzhou and the western regions, paid attention to sturdiness and durability, spaciousness and comfort. However, looking at the 4 horses pulling the carriage, they were all extremely handsome. As the carriage approached, the guards in riding uniforms parted to the left and right, allowing the carriage to drive forward and stop side by side with Yang Fan's carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted and a very annoying face poked out from the window. He said lazily, "What a coincidence. Erlang is also going west. Since we are going the same way, why not come over to chat, reminisce, and have a drink? What do you think?" Yang Fan cried out involuntarily, "Brother Shen Xiu!" Shinmu's carriage was not small. It looked ordinary on the outside, but the inside was extremely luxurious. It was not a problem to stand and walk in this spacious and tall carriage. The seat was also soft and could be sat or laid down. It was unusually comfortable and did not feel tired no matter how far they traveled. The hanging board of the carriage could be flattened. Once it was flattened, it would become a table. There were interlayers on both sides of the carriage. There were preserved fruits, candied fruit, snacks, and even chilled grape wine. The most extravagant thing was that, in the middle of the carriage, there was actually a bucket of sparkling and translucent ice cubes, making the entire carriage pleasantly cool. Who knew where they got the ice cubes after traveling such a long distance? Looking at such a luxurious and comfortable carriage, such a noble and graceful style, and then thinking of his own broken car and the bleeding milk sheep in it, Yang Fan could not help but feel a touch of shame. Shinmu seemed to have seen through his heart. He shook the peach-red wine, letting the ice in the wine clinking against the walls of the glass. He leisurely said, "I am not from an aristocratic family. To be able to enjoy such a life is due to my ability and luck. Erlang is also a person with ability. Luck is on the road to the west. If Erlang has the heart, such a life can be easily obtained by you." When Yang Fan heard this, he was not fooled by the beautiful future that he had described. Instead, his eyes revealed an even more vigilant look. "Looks like this fortuitous opportunity is something that Brother Shin wants to give to me." At this time, Duo was sitting on his right side with the child in her arms. Chi was lightly leaning on Shen Mu's left side. When Yang Fan and Shinmu were talking, the two women were also sizing each other up. Shinmu did not answer immediately. He only smiled and said, "The road is still long. What's the hurry? Let's first drink some wine and enjoy the cool air. Your wife and child can go to the car in the back to rest. That car is currently empty." He deliberately identified Duo as Yang Fan's wife because he wanted to hear Yang Fan reveal Duo's identity. Yang Fan naturally would not fall for this trick. He turned his head to Duo and said, "Since Brother Shin has said so, Duo, you and Xiao Qi can go to the car in the back to rest. Hee, this car is so comfortable to sit in. It would be a waste not to sit." "Xiao Qi? You called me Xiao Qi?" Li Lingchuan's eyes widened, and she looked at Yang Fan in disbelief. "Who are you to me that you dare to call me Xiao Qi?" Yang Fan was startled and said in surprise, "The eldest lady of the Shin family's maiden name is also Xiao Qi? The Xiao Qi that this Yang is talking about is this child." Yang Fan addressed her as the eldest lady of the Shen family. This was returning the favor to Shinmu by giving him a taste of his own medicine. But when Li Lingquan heard that he recognized her as the matriarch of the Shen family, she felt an indescribable comfort in her heart. For a moment, she did not want to pursue how he called her by her pet name that only parents and elders would call her. She only smiled and said, "Your child is called Xiao Qi? Hee, what a coincidence. We are fated." Shinmu saw that she accepted the title of eldest lady of the Shin family. He uncomfortably twisted his butt and coughed. "Chi, since you are fated with this child, why don't you sit in the car at the back and have a chat to relieve your boredom?" Li Lingquan pouted. "I knew that you can't wait for me to leave." "Humph. Yang family's wife, let's go." Duo did not know who this young Master Shin and Miss Chi were. She was originally dressed as a young married woman, Yang Fan's wife, so she did not deny it. And so the Shen family's wife and the Yang family's wife, who were not Yang family's wife, got off the car together and went to the car behind. The carriages continued to move. More than 10 well-dressed knights surrounded the two carriages. Behind them was an empty carriage pulled by 2 crossbow horses. Inside the carriage, Shinmu leaned forward slightly and asked in a low voice, "That woman is not your woman, right?" Yang Fan said, "Of course not." "That child, also not." "Then they are, hee. Brother Shin, every man has a little secret, don't you think so?" "Haha, understood. Understood. Then I won't ask. Brother Shin, I remember that your wife is the eldest lady of the Yang family. Why is it Miss Chi today? This Miss Chi is not your woman, is she?" "Of course not." "Then she is." "Hee, Erling, every man has a little secret, don't you think so?" The two men laughed mischievously, and their eyes were somewhat treacherous. Shenmu opened a silver cup and filled it with wine for Yang Fan. She also used a silver clip to pick up 2 pieces of crushed ice from the silver basin. She smiled and said, "Isn't Erling the Yulin Guard's 100 horsemen imperial bodyguard? Why are you dressed like this heading to the pass?" Yang Fan did not answer, but asked in return, "Could it be that Brother Shin purposely followed this little brother here?" Shinmu said yes and no. "Whether Erling goes to Longyu or not, I will go anyway. After knowing that Erling is going, I came with you. It's convenient for both sides." Yang Fan caught his words and said with a smile, "Just now Brother Shin said Guangzhou, but now it has become Longyu. Brother Shin, your aristocratic families are really amazing. You can even find out about this kind of news." Shinmu laughed and did not hide it anymore. He only said, "Erlang is also going to Longyu. Do you still remember what we talked about that day?" Yang Fan's eyes narrowed. He said, "Brother Shin just said that my opportunity is in Longyu. Is Brother Shin also interested in the matter of me going to Longyu?" Shinmu held the cup in one hand and lightly knocked on the table. He said slowly, "Not only am I interested, I am very interested. I can help you with Erling's matter. I can guarantee that with my help, You will be able to obtain more detailed and useful information than anyone else. But there is one thing. Yang Fan said frankly, I will return the favor, as long as it does not go against my conscience. Brother Shin, please speak freely. Shinmu said, Of course it will not go against my conscience, but it will be disadvantageous to a person. Also, it goes against Master D's opinion. Yang Fan frowned. Shinmu continued, However, going against Master D's opinion does not necessarily mean going against the imperial court's opinion. The current emperor is also happy to see this second matter. Yang Fan asked doubtfully, What is Brother Shin talking about? Can you be honest? Shinmu hesitated and said, You were that person's subordinate and Xue Huai's disciple. Logically speaking, I should not trust you on this matter, let alone discuss it with you. But Master D said that your heart is with Li Tang and you can definitely be trusted. Yang Fan thought to himself, Master D's evaluation must be because I would rather give up the opportunity to be promoted and take the risk to save Blacktooth, Changji's youngest son. However, he does not know that my willingness to save him has nothing to do with Blacktooth, Changji's loyalty to Li Tang. It is such an outrageous action that goes against my conscience. Shinmu said in a deep voice, I believe in Master D's judgment, so I will say it directly. This person is Qiu Shinji. Yang Fan was stunned. He stared fixedly at Shinmu, not knowing what to say for a moment. Shinmu was willing to say it directly not because he believed in D. Renjia's evaluation of Yang Fan, but because he believed that he would give Yang Fan a generous reward that Yang Fan could not refuse. It was true that Yang Fan was once Qiu Shinji's subordinate, but it was very short and he had never become Qiu Shinji's confidant. It was difficult to guarantee that Yang Fan would be loyal to Qiu Shinji just by being his subordinate. As for Xue Huai's close relationship with Qiu Shinji, there was no need to worry. Although Yang Fan was once Xue Huai's disciple, it was due to a strange combination of factors. From the fact that Yang Fan had never used Xue Huai's power to get promoted or make a fortune, it could be seen that Yang Fan was very repulsed by the power of a gigolo. Therefore, he should not have a close relationship with Xue Huai. Yang Fan's stunned expression was interpreted by Shinmu as worry about becoming enemies with the high and mighty general of the Jinwu Guards. Therefore, he immediately gave Yang Fan a reassuring pill. Don't worry, I will not ask you to do anything too dangerous. You will only act as a middleman and pass some powerful evidence to the hands of a powerful figure. Shinmu smiled and said, Qiu Shinji is a traitor of the country. Master D also wants to get rid of him as soon as possible. Master D knows about this. As for the powerful figure I mentioned, his status and power are even greater than Duke D's. If you can cling to him, what do you have to worry about? Of course, Yang Fan knew that D. Renjia wanted to deal with Qiu Shinji, but D. Renjia was already the prime minister. Who else could be more powerful than D. Renjia? Of course, at this moment, even if Shinmu did not say it out loud, he would not have thought that this powerful figure who was more powerful than D. Renjia was actually Princess Taiping. Yang Fan stared at Shinmu, and a mysterious smile slowly appeared on his lips. Shinmu was puzzled as to why Yang Fan's smile was so strange. Yang Fan replied word by word, I agree. Then what is the other thing? Chapter 221. Shinmu smiled. What I am most worried about is that you will not agree to this matter. Haha, you are indeed a person capable of great things. You are decisive. Good, very good. Shinmu's smile faded. The second matter is actually not a big problem. The key is that Duke D is against sending troops to the western regions to recapture the 4 towns of Anxi. You respect Duke D very much and may agree with his opinion. However, the emperor wants to recapture Anxi. You are a member of the court and should naturally follow the emperor's will. This matter should not be too difficult for you. Yang Fan understood his meaning and asked, You are worried that the situation in Longyu will develop in a direction that is not conducive to sending troops. Or perhaps the intelligence gathered in front of the emperor's desk will not be conducive to sending troops to Longyu and cause the emperor to change his mind? Thus, you want the court to send troops to Longyu as much as possible? Shinmu cheerfully said, "It is indeed easy to speak with intelligent people." Yang Fan looked straight at him and asked, "Whether the court sends troops to Longyu or not, does it have much to do with the aristocratic families? Why are you so keen on this matter?" Shinmu replied, "Of course it has a lot to do with it. Do you know how many aristocratic families in the western regions that have been passed down since the Han Dynasty? Do you know how many connections and interests they have with the aristocratic families of the Central Plains? Do you know how much wealth will be lost if the western region's trade routes are in the hands of the foreign races?" Yang Fan was somewhat displeased. "Just for this, for the interests of the aristocratic families, you are willing to start a war?" Shinmu shook his head. "You are wrong. In the end, the aristocratic families are just a representative of the local community. Do you think these interests are just the interests of the aristocratic families? Even if it is just the aristocratic families, do you know how many businesses they run, how many shops they open, how many people they employ, and how many people they provide jobs for? If they lose these sources of income, they will not need to engage in these unprofitable businesses. To these rich and powerful aristocratic families, it is just one less source of income. But to the commoners, it is the loss of a way to live. If the court cannot work for the welfare of its commoners, then why does it exist? Is it just for the glory and wealth of the imperial family? Further on, Longyu and Liaodong are all places where barbarism breeds. If we don't control these places in the hands of the imperial court, they will become a great threat to our Central Plains sooner or later. Although the Li Tang imperial family was Han, they had the blood of the Hu. Of the 24 meritorious officials of the Lingyan Pavilion, 30% were of the Xiongnu, Xianbei, and Turkic races. Therefore, during the reign of Emperor Wen of the Sui dynasty, Huaxia was the orthodox, and the barbarians of the four barbarians were his subordinates. However, our dynasty emphasized that Hua and the barbarians were one. At this point, Shanmu suddenly turned his head and looked out the window. He seemed to be looking at something far away, and his gaze suddenly deepened. Yang Fan followed his gaze and looked out, only to see layers upon layers of green mountains and clear waters, rising and falling, like a beautiful landscape painting. A man has no intention of harming a tiger, but the tiger harms a man. Our Han people are tolerant of all rivers running into the sea. We treat everyone equally, but when the barbarians become strong, they rarely treat us as brothers. You haven't experienced it, so of course you can't understand it. Although I haven't experienced it as well, I was born in a family with 1,000 years of heritage, so I am more aware of many things that have been forgotten or overlooked by others. Shinmu retracted his gaze and looked at Yang Fan, solemnly saying, "In the first year of Yongxing, the Hu dogs and Xianbei pillaged the Central Plains, plundering countless riches and capturing hundreds of thousands of Han women. They raped them in the evening, cooked them in the morning, and thousands of women threw themselves into the river, cutting off the flow of the Yi River. The Jie dogs were violent, treating the Han as sheep and killing them for food. In the fourth year of Yongjia, they surrounded and hunted the Han people, killing more than 100,000 princes and dukes. Not long after, the barbarians and Xianbei set fire to the surrounding areas, roasting the Han for food, killing more than 200,000 people. In the first year of Taixing, Emperor Min was humiliated and died at the hands of the Xianbei. All these are too numerous to list. Today, the Hu barbarians have the ambition of wolves, delighting in plundering and slaughtering, taking glory from the Han people." Shinmu paused for a moment before asking, "Do you know what I just said?" Yang Fan shook his head. Shinmu continued, "What I just recited is a part of the Kill the Hu order written by King Wu Ai. Yang Fan has heard of the Kill the Hu order before, and his countenance could not help but change. Ah, so this is the Kill the Hu order." Shinmu continued, "No one is clearer than us aristocratic families on what happened at that time. At that time, the number of who migrated from the north to the central plains has reached 7 million. But the local Han population is only 5 to 6 million. The number of who is still increasing, but our Han people are constantly being killed, driven, enslaved, and our numbers are decreasing. King Wu Ai issued the Kill the Hu order, calling on the exterminated Han people to rebel and kill countless Hu. Although he was defeated and died in the end, he accomplished two great things. Firstly, under his Kill the Hu decree, the Han people in the north, who had been bullied and humiliated, responded and killed a large number of the foreign tribes. If he had not stood up at that time, then after the Han people in the north were killed, their descendants would continue to multiply and grow stronger, and then they would attack Jiangnan. At that time, there are only 3 million Han people in Jiangnan. They will also be killed, and the Han people will be extinct. The second thing was that even though the martial mourning heavenly king had died, his heroic deeds allowed the cruel Hu people to see clearly that the Han people weren't sheep that could be bullied by anyone. Even though they defeated Ran Min in the end, their hearts were filled with reverence. They bestowed Ran Min the title of martial mourning heavenly king to appease the Han people. From then on, they no longer dared to bully and slaughter the Han people. They did not even dare to let the Han people serve as soldiers, and did not dare to let the Han people touch weapons. It was under these circumstances that the small barbarians and barbarians killed each other, and the Han people who only focused on farming were able to recuperate and multiply. By the time the continuous wars caused a large number of Hu people to die in battle, they had no choice but to once again recruit Han soldiers. The Han people's strength could no longer be ignored. At this time, in order to win over the Han people, they had no choice but to marry off their princesses to the rich and powerful families of the Han people. The Han people used this opportunity to grasp power step by step and continued to grow until Yang Jian destroyed the Hu people and established the Sui dynasty. At this point, Shenmu sneered and said, "It's funny to say that to this day, there are some arrogant, boastful, and stupid people who forget their ancestors, who are still cursing Ran Min as a butcher. If it wasn't for King Wu Ai, his ancestors would have long been enslaved to death, and he would not even exist." At this point, Shenmu said to Yang Fan with sorrow, the situation at that time was really scary. The aristocratic families all fled to Jiangnan, living in fear. The central plains changed, and the aristocratic families never feared it. The emperor could be Zhang Wang Li Zhao, and the world would still be the Han people's country. However, when the Hu people entered the central plains, there was a real possibility of extinction. I never denied that my main goal was for the continuation and inheritance of my family, but to achieve this goal, I had to maintain the prosperity of my Han people. If the skin doesn't exist, where will the hair attach to? So, even if my original goal wasn't to help the world, what does it matter? Now that our central plains is strong and prosperous, if we don't take advantage of this time to control the western regions, consolidate the northwest border, and suppress the Hu people's growth, are we going to wait for the central plains to weaken or for internal strife to occur and give the Hu people the opportunity to invade? Erlang, you and I are good men. Why don't we take this opportunity to help our central plains recover the western regions? Not only can we serve the country, help the people, and achieve success and fame. Yang Fan slightly lowered his eyes. After a long time, his eyes slowly raised and met Shenmu's eyes. "Brother Shin, you've convinced me." Yang Fan raised his cup with one hand and supported the bottom with the other. He solemnly gave a toast to Shenmu and said in a deep voice, "Let us take this opportunity to do something great." Shenmu was overjoyed and also solemnly raised his cup. Dang! The two silver cups touched, and the wine in the cups rippled like blood. The cavalrymen escorted the 3 carriages, following the inclination of the mountain, making many turns to the left and to the right, traversed the difficult mountain path, and after rounding the foothills came a comparatively gentle downhill road, from which the journey was easy. Duo brought the child and Miss Chi-Chi to stay in the second carriage. Although Miss Chi-Chi was the daughter of a noble family, she did not put on any airs. After a few days, she became close to the straightforward and lively Duo. Naturally, Xiao-Qi also became Miss Chi-Chi's favorite. She always rushed to do such interesting things as changing diapers and feeding goats milk. At first, she was clumsy and needed Duo to teach her, but now she seemed to be even more skilled than Duo. Because of Xiao-Qi and the fact that Yang Fan and Shinmu were inseparable, it was not convenient for her to come over. These few days, she rarely pestered Shinmu, which made Shinmu heave a sigh of relief. After going down the hill, there was an endless plain in front of them. There were no road signs here, and people who were not familiar with this place would not know where they were. Shenmu had a guide who was familiar with this road, so Yang Fan was much more relaxed. He did not even bother to ask for directions, and only knew that after passing Tong Pass, they walked west for about half a month. During this journey, he realized that there were more than a dozen guards around Shenmu, and there seemed to be people secretly scouting for Shenmu and protecting him. Yang Fan was not a disciple of a noble family, and he only thought that the disciples of a noble family were like this. He could not help but be speechless. However, he did not know that the disciples of a noble family were not great generals with thousands of troops and horses, nor were they high officials in charge of a prefecture. How could they have such prestige when they went out? It was because Shenmu was not an ordinary disciple of a noble family. As the hidden sex patriarch of the succession hall, Shenmu was involved in many things, and no one dared to let him take risks. The carriage went down the hill and entered a hilly area. The river and hills here were neither low nor high, and the undulating slope was very gentle, so it looked much more flat and wide. Especially when looking into the distance, there was no undulation at all, as though it was a flat plain. About 2 miles away, a forest could be vaguely seen. At this moment, a short horn sounded from the forest. Yang Fan and Shenmu were playing chess in the carriage. The chessboard and chess pieces were made of magnetic stones, which were suitable to be used in the carriage. There was no need to worry even if it was subverted. When he suddenly heard the horn, Shenmu, who was about to place a white chess piece on the chessboard, suddenly raised his head and looked out of the window alertly. This wasn't the first time that Yang Fan had heard the horn along the way, and it was only one sound each time. Every time the horn sounded, there would be a mountain ridge, a forest, a bridge, a canyon, or any other place that could hide an ambush. However, the horn that he heard in the past was always a long sound, and it had never been this short. Therefore, when he saw Shenmu's expression, Yang Fan immediately realized that something had happened. Note: King Wu AIs whose slaying order did exist, but it was said that there weren't any detailed contents that had been passed down. The article that could be found might be a forgery by the later generations, so we shall use it for now. Chapter 222. When the short sound of the horn was heard, the knights around the carriage immediately drew their swords in their hands and took up their guard. A moment later, 2 short horns sounded from the distant forest. The 2 riders at the front immediately made a hand signal to each other and galloped into the forest. When they left, Shenmu and Yang Fan had just walked out of the carriage, and the 2 had already galloped into the distance, leaving only a trail of dust behind them. Not long after, the 2 riders returned from the forest and stopped in front of Shenmu's carriage. One of them loudly said, "Lang Jun, there are 7 to 8 corpses in the forest and 2 carriages. The corpses are still warm and the blood has yet to coagulate. They should have died not too long ago." The other person replied, "We have checked the surroundings. There is no trace of anyone within a 10-li radius. The murderer has already escaped far away." Shenmu raised his brows and said, "Let's go and take a look." He did not get off the carriage, and the entire convoy rushed into the forest. Yang Fan carefully sized up the surrounding riders. Every one of them was a strong man, and their mounts were also majestic. As they followed the carriage forward, they gradually formed groups of 3 and formed an offensive and defensive formation. Because there was not much cover in the surroundings, Yang Fan could vaguely see a few figures in the distance. However, these vigilant riders turned a blind eye to them. It was obvious that they were the people secretly protecting Shenmue. Due to this accident, their figures were slightly revealed. Yang Fan could not help but say to Shenmue, "The bodyguards under Brother Shin are all extraordinary. Although I do not know how good they are at fighting on the battlefield, as bodyguards, I think they are more competent than the Imperial Guards in the palace." Shenmue smiled. This is different. After all, the Imperial Court and the Jianghu are two completely different places. The environment and people that the Imperial Court's bodyguards and the Jianghu's warriors live in are completely different. If a hungry and cruel wolf is chained to the house as a watchdog, it will lose its wild nature after a long time. Speaking up to this point, Shenmue suddenly felt something and smiled apologetically at Yang Fan. "My apologies, this brother's analogy is somewhat inappropriate." Yang Fan did not feel offended. He only smiled and said, "Even so, I'm still amazed to personally witness Brother Shin's shrewdness and capability." Shenmue lightly nodded and said with deep emotion, "Of course. These aristocratic families have risen for thousands of years. No matter how the dynasty changes, they have always stood tall. Of course they have their outstanding points. The branches of aristocratic families are incomparably prosperous and spread throughout the imperial court and the common people. In the imperial court, there are generals and ministers for generations. In the imperial court, there are rich merchants and wealthy families. Regardless of the imperial court or the common people, their power is deep and their foundation is deep. In addition to the descendants of the main branch of the aristocratic families, there were also many external forces that were allied or supported by these aristocratic families. They intertwined with each other and intertwined with each other. An empire can be easily destroyed, but it's very difficult for an aristocratic family. I dare say that even if the world were to undergo an earth-shattering change, the first to recover and rise would still be these aristocratic families with deep foundations." Shenmue was startled and laughed involuntarily. "Yes, although I am also a descendant of an aristocratic family. As a side branch, I have been ostracized since young. Therefore, I unknowingly put myself out of the picture." Shenmue was startled and laughed involuntarily. "Yes, although I am also a descendant of an aristocratic family. As a side branch, I have been ostracized since young. Therefore, I unknowingly put myself out of the picture." Yang Fan had heard him talk about the rough experiences he had in the past more than once and could not help but feel curious. However, he did not have the time to ask, as they had already arrived at the edge of the forest. The carriage stopped at the edge of the forest and did not go deep into the forest. Yang Fan and Shenmue alighted from the carriage and walked into the forest, accompanied by the guards. Miss Chi-Chi could not bear the loneliness and also jumped out of the carriage. She picked up a piece of preserved fruit and excitedly wanted to join in the fun. In the end, she had just run a few steps when she saw a headless corpse lying on a bush. The neck was badly mutilated and had a slightly black color. At first, they thought that it was because the blood had dried up. However, when they got closer, there was a buzzing sound from the cut of the neck and a swarm of flies flew up, revealing the bloody wound with the trachea and tendons tangled together. Miss Chi-Chi screamed and danced a hula dance. Then, with a wah, she vomited decisively. This time, she did not need Shenmue's advice and ran back to the carriage. Shenmue brushed his head and brushed the piece of preserved fruit that Miss Chi-Chi had thrown off and walked forward without a change in expression. There were a total of 7 corpses in the forest. They were dressed as small peddlers from the western region. There were 2 overturned carriages on the ground with many goods, such as coarse cloth, pottery, and iron pots. It was a messy scene. The 7 people had died in different ways. Some had been shot, some had been hacked, and some had been assassinated. Not far from where they had died, there were some puddles of blood, and there were traces of dragging. Then there was the messy sound of horse hooves. It seemed that the people who had killed them had also died, but their corpses had been carried away. It should be an ambush. They first set up an ambush in the forest and killed a few people before eliminating the survivors. The ground is very messy, and the goods were not taken away. Even the weapons abandoned by the victims were not taken away. It seems that they must have noticed us attacking the front lines and fled in a hurry. From this, I can deduce that there shouldn't be many people ambushing us." Shinmu rubbed his chin and muttered. Yang Fan nodded his head. His gaze fell on a bloody saber that was still in the hand of one of the corpses. He then shifted his gaze to an old tree with a broken spear stuck in it. Yang Fan's gaze turned solemn as he asked in a deep voice, "Have you searched the bodies of the corpses?" A very calm-looking middle-aged man nodded and said, "We've searched them, but there's nothing that can prove their identity. However, 2 of them are wearing dark armor under their robes. Look." The middle-aged man waved his hand, and 2 corpses were carried in front of Yang Fan and Shinmu. Their robes were untied, and they were indeed wearing dark armor under their robes. Yang Fan identified them one by one and carefully looked at the other corpses. They all had Han faces, but he did not recognize any of them. Yang Fan could not help but reveal a puzzled expression. Shinmu followed beside him. Observing his expression, he asked, "Why, you suspect that the corpses are from the 100 Cavalry?" Yang Fan shook his head and replied, "I do not recognize them. They are all unfamiliar faces. If they were from the 100 Cavalry, I would recognize them. However, these corpses should be from the imperial court and were sent here on official business." Yang Fan took out half a spear handle from one of the corpses and pointed at the copper pattern on the handle. He told Shinmu, "This is the special pattern of the spear used by the Imperial Guards. Also, this dark armor is specially made by the government. These 2 people must be the leaders. That's why they receive such treatment." Shinmu asked, "You can determine their identity just based on their weapons?" Yang Fan replied, "Armor, crossbows, spears, lances, and armors are all prohibited for private ownership. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to rebellion. Only before the soldiers go out to battle can they be allocated equipment. Who among the commoners would possess these weapons? Moreover, they are specially registered by the Imperial Guards. Is this not enough to prove their identity? According to the regulations of the Imperial Court, armor, crossbows, lances, and armors are strictly prohibited for private ownership. Even soldiers are not allowed to equip them when they go out on private business." Yang Fan did not mention the mo Dao that they used because it is not prohibited for private ownership. Although the mo Dao is the most powerful of the 4 types of weapons made from the Tang Dynasty, it is only in comparison to the other types of weapons. The mo Dao is only one of the many types of soldiers in the Tang Dynasty. The opportunities for it to display its power on the battlefield are far inferior to the spears, lances, and crossbows. Most of the time, the mo Dao is used as an auxiliary weapon for individual infantry. Its formation effect is even worse than a dense formation of long spears. Therefore, it is not prohibited for private ownership. If the deceased were all using knives and did not have anything on them that could prove their identity, Yang Fan would not be able to guess their identity. However, the long spears and the dark armor with the special patterns of the Imperial Guards revealed their true identity. Of course, ordinary people would not be able to notice these hidden characteristics. However, Yang Fan is a member of the Imperial Guards and naturally can see it at a glance. After listening to Yang Fan's explanation, Shenmu could not help but secretly speculate. Since Yang Fan does not know these people, then they should not be from the 100 Cavalry. Are these people Princess Taiping's men, Wu Qingxi's men, or Wu Sanxi's men? Did they die from the secret infighting of other forces, or were they attacked by small groups of horse bandits? Just as Shinmu was thinking, a guard suddenly said, "Lang Jun, there is something here." Hearing the voice, Yang Fan and Shen Mu looked over and saw the guard bending over and pulling something out from under a low bush. There was a pool of blood where he stood, and beside it was a drag mark more than 10 feet long. It seems that someone died here and was later dragged away on a horse. The thing that the guard pulled out from the bush was a swan and eye belt with 7 colored vertical stripes. Shinmu took the belt, which was made from a mixture of cow and wool, and looked at it carefully. His eyes gradually narrowed and he said, "Although I do not know who the deceased is, I think I already know the identity of the killer." Yang Fan asked, "Who are they?" Shinmu did not answer and turned to the guard who found the swan and eyed belt and ordered, "Search carefully again. If there are no other clues, bury the dead on the spot." Finishing, he ordered another guard, "Inform Zhang Yi to personally escort me on my journey to the west. If there are any suspicious people along the way, it is better to kill wrongly than to let them go." Shenmu has always given Yang Fan the impression that he does not care about anything. Only now does he faintly reveal a hint of coldness. The guard did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly complied. He turned around and left. It is unknown how he intends to inform Zhang Yi, who has not been seen yet. After Shenmu finished giving his orders, he turned to Yang Fan and changed into a spring breeze-like smile, saying, "Come, let's talk in the carriage." The two of them returned to the carriage. Shinmu gently stroked the soft and fine woolen belt. He turned to Yang Fan and said, "This material is different from the silk belt used by our Central Plains Han people, and also different from the leather belt used by other tribes. This is a woolen belt knitted by spinning and weaving, unique to the Tubo people." Yang Fan's eyes flashed and he asked in astonishment, "This is still our territory. How can the Tubo people commit murder here?" Shinmu said, "That's right, this is our territory. But for some people in our dynasty, this place is dispensable. But in the eyes of the Tubo people, this is the foundation of their survival. So the Tubo people pay more attention to this place than us and manage it better. Have you heard of the famous Tubo Gorge?" Chapter 223. Tufan Gorge? Famous? Yang Fan really does not know, so he can only shake his head in shame. Shinmu knew that he lived in Southeast Asia when he was young and moved to Luoyang when he grew up, so he has never been to other places. Seeing that he does not know, he is not surprised and said, "So you don't know much about Longyo's archenemy, the Tufan people? Then I will briefly explain to you, and finally we will talk about this Tufan Gorge." Yang Fan said, "Please advise me." Shinmu said, "Speaking of the four barbarians and D-Man, our Central Plains has always regarded them as barbarians and disdained them. But this can only be reflected in education and people's livelihood. Talking about military affairs, haha." Shinmu shook his head and said, "First, talking about military strength, the Tufan population is not as large as our dynasty, but all of them are soldiers. Their total military strength is at least 400,000. And our dynasty's total military strength is about 400 to 600,000, and we need at least 50,000 men and horses to guard the capital. Our vast territory needs to be garrisoned, so when our dynasty sends troops against the Tufan, we rarely have more than 200,000 men, and the Tufan can deploy their troops nearby. So in terms of military strength, our dynasty is at a disadvantage. Talking about military strength, the Tufan army is like the people. The people are like the army. Their culture is fierce. They love to fight, and when they fight, they're not afraid of death. In every battle, it is often when the front line is completely dead that the rear line enters the battle. Their bravery is in no way inferior to our dynasty's army. Talking about weapons and equipment, the Tufan people are different from the Turks. Their bows and arrows are not considered formidable. What is formidable is their armor and weapons. The Tufan elite troops, men and horses, will wear chain mail, their whole body covered in armor. Only their eyes are open. Only a strong blade can injure them. Not only are they good at riding, they are also good at fighting on foot. Although they may not have learned our dynasty's art of war, but the grassland people have comprehended the art of separation and encirclement from hunting, which is not inferior to our dynasty's art of war. Yang Fan sucked in a breath of cold air and said in shock, "They're actually that powerful!" In Yang Fan's imagination, he had thought that these Turks and Tubo were just a bunch of beggar soldiers. When they go to battle, they're nothing more than a bunch of fur-covered soldiers, armed with big sticks and iron forks, similar to the refugees who gathered together during the famine years. Who would have thought that, in terms of military strength, They're not inferior to the Tang dynasty. Moreover, they have the advantage in military strength and geographical advantage. No wonder the Tang dynasty has always been cautious in deploying their troops to the western region. Shenmu said, "That's right. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you emerge victorious in every battle. If you blindly and arrogantly consider yourself as the Celestial Empire, you will suffer a great loss." If Tubo's military force was not this strong, do you think that during the Lantern Festival, how could the Tubo envoys dare to be so arrogant in front of the Queen of Heaven, even daring to openly ask for the Jin Oyongu cup? Shenmu smiled and said, "Of course, they also have their own shortcomings and they can't avoid them. We'll talk about this in the future. Today we will only talk about the enemy's strong point. Not only the Tubo people are good at fighting, they are also good at using their intelligence. When it comes to savagery, it always makes people think that they are cruel and savage by nature. They only have brute force, but it's very easy for people to overlook their intelligence. To say something impolite in terms of using their intelligence, the Tubo people have put in far more effort than our court. Their scouts, which I mentioned just now, are 100 times stronger than our scouts and mounted scouts. In their territory, in the territory they occupied, in the territory they wanted to occupy, their eyes and ears are everywhere, everywhere they look. These scouts and spies can be one person, they can also be a group of people, they can also be a family with the old and the young, or even a small tribe. They can even recruit the people of the conquered tribes and regions as scouts. After controlling their families, they will be sent out to act as their eyes and ears. Yang Fan recalled the time when he was in Luoyang's Xiu workshop, where he obtained information from the seemingly unremarkable people of the town. He couldn't help but be enlightened and said, "I understand now. Once these people infiltrate into the places we control, they will infiltrate into all walks of life and even become the servants of the government or the auxiliary soldiers of the military camp. It's impossible for there to be no signs of any movement. And with these eyes and ears that can penetrate every nook and cranny, as long as you hear a little and they see a little, when combined together, will be absolutely detailed and true information." Shenmu nodded and said, "That's right. But not only do they spy for information, they will also use their hidden identities to deliberately provoke some conflicts, inciting the conflict between the army and the local people. Sometimes they will even carry out assassinations and ambushes, making the people panic at the slightest sound and treat every bush and tree as an enemy." Yang Fan said, "Like the scene just now?" Shenmu cast his gaze out of the window again and said thoughtfully, "I only hope that it's really like this. Otherwise, it means that the information about your secret hiding in Longyu has already been leaked." Yang Fan thought that the rest of the journey would not be peaceful, but as they traveled westward, they did not encounter a single battle. The entire journey was calm and peaceful. There were few times when they were in the sparsely populated forest, and they had seen a few dead people who had just died. But every time they would find an arrow symbol on a nearby yellow wall or tree trunk. Once they saw this symbol, Shenmu's men would let down their guard and calmly continue on their way. Thinking back to Shenmu's words about Zhang Yi personally leading men to escort them westward, Yang Fan guessed that this arrow must be a symbol left behind by that Zhang Yi. Later on, when they passed by a few towns to rest and stroll, Yang Fan would often hear some merchants talking about how much goods the little flying general had stolen and how many people he had killed. After hearing more, he knew that this little flying general was a famous horse bandit leader who roamed Longyu. It was said that this person was ruthless and fierce. Although he only had about 300 men, the 2,000 to 3,000 strong horse bandit gang did not dare to provoke him. This was because the little flying general's subordinates were all ruthless characters who could fight against 10 men. If they really fought, the 2,000 to 3,000 strong horse bandit gang might not be able to provoke him. Moreover, the little flying general's subordinates were few, and he could come and go as he pleased. If he wanted to find you, he could find you. If he wanted to hide from you, Longyu was high and wide. If he wanted to hide, there was no way to find him. That was why there were very few people who dared to provoke him. And this person's symbol was an arrow. As long as he was involved in a case, he would never conceal his identity. He would generously leave a sharp wolf-fang arrow as a symbol. His nickname, Little Flying General, was due to his superb archery skills that allowed him to shoot through a willow tree from 100 steps away. However, the Little Flying General couldn't help but feel proud of himself for this, so he designed the symbol of his identity as an arrowhead. Yang Fan thought to himself, perhaps this Zhang Yi is the Little Flying General. They arrived at the Huang River. This was Yang Fan's first stop in the western regions, and also Duo and Shao Qi's final stop. The Huang River faced the Long Mountains in the east, the Red Ridge in the west, the Yellow River in the south, and the Chilean River in the north. 800 Huang valleys crisscrossed and contained thousands of rivers and streams. It was the birthplace of the ancient Changyan Emperor. The car stopped on a small hill from where they could see the Huang River city in the distance. On both sides of the road were rolling hills. There were tower-shaped pines, precious red pines, round cypresses that had experienced the vicissitudes of life, tall and straight spruce, as well as countless red birch, white birch, and rough-skinned birch. Tigers, wild wolves, red deer, roe deer, argali antelopes, foxes, snow chickens, stone chickens, and other wild beasts and mountain birds lived in the forest. In front of him was a grassland overflowing with green. The grassland was overgrown with shrubs, and together they weaved together to form an emerald green field. Flocks of white sheep and yellow cows could be faintly seen wandering on the grassland like clouds. Duo stood on the mountain with Shao Qi in her arms. Looking at the familiar scenery in front of her, she couldn't help but burst into tears. She was finally back. After Madame's death, she had felt a sense of loneliness and uneasiness every day and night in Luoyang. Now that she was back and saw the familiar grassland, that sense of security finally returned to her heart. These were tears of joy, but also tears of sorrow when she thought of Lang and Madame who had left and never returned. Shen Mu stood side by side with Yang Fan. He smiled cheerfully at a guard and said, Zhang Yi has done a good job along the way. Tell him to come and accompany me to the Huang River. Yes, the guard answered and hurriedly retreated. No one knew what method he used to communicate with Yang Fan, but when Yang Fan and the others had moved around the mountaintop for a while and were about to board the carriage to continue their journey, for steeds suddenly emerged from the bushes beside a jade-like river at the foot of the slope in front of them and galloped up the mountain. There were 4 riders on the 4 horses. One of them had his hair draped in a headband. If a crescent moon was added to the headband, he would look like a Duda. He wore a large robe that reached to his knees and a leather belt around his waist. There was a broadsword with a thick back and a bow slung diagonally on his shoulder. The bow was as long as an ordinary person's height. There were 3 other people behind him. They didn't wear their hair in a bun and only used a headband to tie their hair so that it wouldn't cover their faces or obstruct their line of sight. They let their hair flutter behind their shoulders, giving them a very boorish and heroic appearance. 2 of these 3 people were in their 30s, rough and burly. The other person was a little younger, looking to be in his early 20s. He wore a scarlet headband and didn't have a beard. His face was clear and handsome, but there seemed to be a touch of evil in his demeanor. All 4 of them carried bows and arrows, but the one in the front had the biggest bow. Looking at his face, thick eyebrows and wide mouth, he looked very awe-inspiring. Yang Fan couldn't help thinking, could it be that this person is the Little Flying General Zhang Yi? Unexpectedly, this person flew to the front of the carriage, rolled down the saddle, and nimbly led the horse to one side. Yang Fan was surprised. This person isn't the Little Flying General Zhang Yi? He was about to choose from the 2 dark-faced men among the remaining 3 when the young man with the red headband, with a slightly evil aura, jumped down from the horse and left the horse. He quickly walked forward and knelt down on one knee. He cupped his fists and said loudly, Zhang Yi greets the sect leader. Yang Fan was secretly shocked. So this person is the little flying general. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Shinmu smiled and pulled the little flying general Zhang Yi up. He said, "We're brothers. There's no need to be so polite. You've done well in Longyu these 2 years. We haven't seen each other for a long time. I asked you to come with me to go to Huangshui to have a gathering. There are some things I need to tell you. Come, I'll introduce you to a friend." As Shanmu said this, he pulled Yang Fan in front of him. The little flying general Zhang Yi looked at Yang Fan, and his eyes immediately shot out a frightening light like that of a wolf. He stretched out his hand and pushed Shinmu. He suddenly pulled out his saber and at the same time shouted, "Ashinamuzi, it's actually you!" Chapter 224. Yang Fan knew that this little flying general, Zhang Yi, must be an important subordinate of Shinmu. From Shenmu's tone, it is very likely that he will need his help with what he is about to do. With a face full of smiles, Yang Fan hurriedly greeted him. He had just cupped his fists when Zhang Yi shouted and pushed Shinmu away with all his might. He pulled out his saber and slashed it towards Yang Fan's face. His saber moved like a wheel, swift and fierce like lightning. Yang Fan was greatly startled, but fortunately he had a good martial art skill. Immediately he bent his waist, and without bending his legs, relying only on the strength of his feet, he leaped diagonally to evade the attack. Shwa! The bright saber flashed, and a piece of Yang Fan's clothes was blown away by the mountain breeze. If Yang Fan had been a split second slower, this saber would have cut him in half. Even if he had been a split second slower, at least one of his legs would have been left behind. Yang Fan saw that this person suddenly attacked with such a vicious method and was slightly annoyed. He turned around and circled in the air before landing on the ground with a schwa sound. He crouched down like an eagle, crouching on a cliff, and was about to attack. At this time, 2 of Shinmu's bodyguards had already blocked his way and shouted at Zhang Yi, "Zhang Yi, have you gone mad?" Zhang Yi shouted, "You 2 fools, you actually let Ashinamuzi sneak up to sect leader's side and almost killed him. Get out of my way." Shinmu has always been a steady and intelligent person, but after being pushed by Zhang Yi, he fell into a sorry state. Shinmu does not know martial arts at all, and after being pushed by Zhang Yi, he fell flat on his back. When he hit the ground, his back was hit by a mountain rock, and it was so painful that he felt like his back was about to break. 2 of his men hurried forward to help him up. Shinmu cried out in pain as he crawled up from the ground and angrily said, "Zhang Yi, you bastard, what are you doing?" Chi and Duo had already boarded the carriage. Seeing this scene, she also jumped down and rushed forward to support Shinmu. She glared angrily at Zhang Yi. Looking at Shenmu's eager expression, if not for the fact that Shinmu was questioning Zhang Yi, she would have rushed forward to teach this brat a lesson. Zhang Yi stamped his foot and said, "Sect Master, you have always been smart, but this time you are muddle-headed. How did you allow a Turk to come to your side? How lucky! How lucky! This person must have some other evil intentions," which was why he didn't make a move on the sect master. Otherwise, it would really be over. We can't let him escape this time. Quickly surround him. Shinmu supported his old waist and limped to his side. Exasperated, he said, "Turks? Who are the Turks?" Zhang Yi pointed at Yang Fan and said, "It's him." Only then did Yang Fan realize that Zhang Yi had mistaken him for someone else. Afraid of causing misunderstandings, he did not dare to make a move. He stood still and looked at him coldly. Shinmu snapped him. His name was Yang Fan from Luoyang. When did he become a Turk? Zhang Yi was stunned and muttered, "How can it be? Ah, that's right, sect master. It must be his sophistry that deceived you." Shinmu rolled his eyes and asked, "Why are you so sure that he is a Turk?" Zhang Yi said, "Because I have seen him before." Shinmu asked, "When did you see him?" Zhang Yi said, "A month ago I received the sect master's order to rush to Guangzhou to provide support. I wanted to do one more job before I leave." If I manage to rob a fat sheep, I can get some good stuff for the sect master as a greeting gift. In the end, as luck would have it, we robbed his carriage, and many of my brothers were killed or injured. Zhang Yi pointed at Yang Fan and gritted his teeth. That's right. It's him. I remember it clearly. He is Ashinamuzi. Shenmu held his waist and sighed to the sky. He said weakly, Zhang Yi, a month ago, he and I, that is, this Ashinamuzi you speak of, were at a family's wedding banquet in Luoyang. Could it be that this person you speak of has the ability to fly in the sky and travel through the earth? He can appear in both the Turkic steppe and Luoyang at the same time? Zhang Yi's eyes widened, and he stammered, How can it be? How can it be? His appearance. Shenmu looked at Yang Fan and asked, Does this person really look like that Ashinamuzi you speak of? Zhang Yi said confidently, Not just look, but look exactly the same. Sect Master, you should know that I have the best memory. Even if I met someone once or twice 10 years ago, I would still be able to recognize him. I would never mistake him. Other than his clothes, is exactly the same as that Ashinamuzi. Yang Fan could not help but ask, This brother, I do know a friend in Luoyang called Ashina. Who is this Ashinamuzi you speak of? Zhang Yi exclaimed, the voice doesn't sound like it. That's not right, the voice can be faked. Shenmu helplessly said, I just said that this person can't be the person you met in the Turkic steppe, because when you met this Ashinamuzi, I was drinking with him in Luoyang. The world is vast, and there are many people with similar appearances. Even if they look exactly the same, there are few differences in height and weight, but that doesn't mean that there are none. If you're not mistaken, then he's exactly the same as the person you met. There's such a thing? Zhang Yi still did not believe it. After Shenmu explained it again and again, Zhang Yi had no choice but to believe it. Shenmu said that when he met Ashinamuzi, he was drinking with Yang Fan in Luoyang. The sect master would not lie to him. This meant that Luoyang and the Turkic steppe were separated by several thousand li, so it was impossible for these two people to be the same person. Zhang Yi scratched his head and hesitantly said, It seems that I really did get the wrong person. Yang Fan unhappily said, Brother mistook me for someone else and almost killed me. Shenmu smiled apologetically. Erlang, please don't blame me. This brother of mine is good except that he is a little rash. Because of this, I cannot keep him by my side and send him to Longyu, who knew that after not seeing him for a few years, he is still as hot-tempered as ever. Luckily, he did not really hurt you. I apologize on his behalf. Erlang, please don't take this matter to heart. Shenmu bowed to Yang Fan and glared at Zhang Yi, saying, What are you waiting for? Apologize to Erlang. Zhang Yi hesitantly bowed to Yang Fan and said no. Yang Fan bitterly smiled. Forget it. Luckily, I did not die. If I was really cut into two by your saber, even if I have a stomach full of grievances, there is no one I can reason with. Shenmu pulled Yang Fan and Zhang Yi up the carriage. After they were seated, Shenmu reintroduced them to each other and asked Zhang, who is that Ashinamuzi you mentioned just now? Zhang Yi, Ashinamuzi is Ashina Huan's son. He slapped his thigh in annoyance and said, That day he went to give betrothal gifts to another tribe leader. The carriage was loaded with a lot of valuables, and there was a large group of men and women in the procession. It looked like there was a lot of money to be had. Actually, I would not be so careless when robbing a fat sheep. I would definitely find out the other party's identity first. That day, I received the news and was in a hurry to go to Guangzhou to fetch you. I was careless. Hi, I lost more than 10 of my brothers. Shenmu did not care about the details of his robbery and only asked, Ashina Huan? You mean Moshe? Zhang Yi, that's right. His granny, if not for Moshe's son, I would not have suffered such a loss. Yang Fan could not help asking, Who is this Moshe? Shenmu explained, Moshe is the younger brother of the eastern Turkic Khagan Gudulu. Gudulu fell seriously ill at the beginning of the year, and the Eastern Turks are currently under Moshe's control. The Eastern Turks and Western Turks were originally one family, and their Kogin belonged to the Ashina clan. Ashina is the surname of the Turkic Kogin, meaning pale wolf's eyes. Yang Fan nodded in understanding. Zhang Yi continued, Erling, I am truly sorry. You look exactly like that Ashina Musi. At the time, I did not expect that two people could look so alike, so... Shinmu glared at him. So you stabbed him in the head? Even if Erling really is Ashina Musi in disguise, is there a need to do this? You just need to state his identity, and he will not be able to escape. Humph! You have been in Longyu for so many years, and you have not improved at all. When will you grow a brain? Zhang Yi was scolded to the point that he could not raise his head and did not dare to retort. After Shenmu finished, he thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. Ha! Speaking of which, this matter is really interesting. Erling, the two generals who went to Longyu to inspect the military situation this time are Qiu Xinji and Wang Xiaojie. Do you know what happened to Wang Xiaojie? Yang Fan did not know why he suddenly brought up Wang Xiaojie and could not help but ask, You are talking about General Wang of the Right Eagle Guard? What happened to him? Shinmu said, In the 3rd year and 9th month of Yifeng, Emperor Gaozong ordered Li Jingxian, who was also the governor of Shanzhou, to lead the army to attack Tufan. At that time, Wang Xiaojie was the deputy chief of the army, led by Minister of Works Lu Xinli. When the army reached Feichuan, they met a famous Tufan general, Luan Qinling. Both sides had a huge battle. This Luan Qinling is known as the Tufan god of war and has been fighting with our Tang dynasty for decades. Whether it is Shui, Rengui, Guodaifeng, Li Jingxian, Wei Daijie, or Lu Shurda, all of them were defeated by him. In all these years, among our Tang dynasty generals, only He Qi Changji has defeated Luan Qinling. Naturally, we lost the battle at Feichuan. Lu Xinli's army was completely annihilated. Li Jingxian did not dare to save him. Lu Xinli was injured and died not long after. Originally, Wang Xiaojie would not be able to escape death, but Tufan Sang Puchi de Songzhen saw him by chance and treated him with great respect. In the end, he was sent back to the Tang dynasty. Why is that? Yang Fan asked in astonishment. Shen Mu smiled and said, Because Wang Xiaojie's appearance is very similar to Sang Puchi de Songzhen's late father. Sang Puchi de Songzhen believes in reincarnation. When he saw Wang Xiaojie, he could not help but think of his late father. How could he dare to be disrespectful to Wang Xiaojie? This Sang Puchi first treated Wang Xiaojie as an honored guest. Later on, he saw that Wang Xiaojie could not forget the Tang dynasty and was very unhappy living in Tufan. So he simply sent someone to send him back. Shinmu laughed aloud and said, Erling, Wang Xiaojie only looks like Sang Puchi's father. But you are exactly the same as that Ashina Musi. Too bad your luck is not as good as Great General Wang. Because of this, Great General Wang escaped with his life. Because of this, you almost lost your life. Ha! Yang Fan snorted. Thinking about the same reason, but different treatment, he could not help but laugh. In that case, I should not blame Zhang Xiong but that Ashina Musi. What do you mean? Zhang Yi asked. Yang Fan said, Because Great General Wang looks like Sang Puchi's father, he was treated as an honored guest and was respectfully sent back to his country. As for me, I look exactly the same as that Ashina Musi, but I was almost implicated by him. This is clearly because his relationship with others is not good. If one day I see this Musi, I will definitely beat his head into a pig's head so that he will never look like me again, so that he will not implicate good people. Hearing this, Shen Mu and Zhang Yi could not help bursting into laughter. At this time, a horseman rushed outside the carriage window. Bending down, he reported, Zhongzhu, we have arrived at Huangshui City.